Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Norberto Ronquillo. In 2019, Norberto Ronquillo, a 22-year-old Mexican student, was kidnapped by unidentified men shortly after leaving college. He had just completed his final semester before graduating. Norberto lived with his uncles in southern Mexico City, just a 15-minute walk from Pedregal University, on the evening of July 4. He left the university at 9 p.m. and texted his girlfriend to say he was coming home. A security camera recorded him leaving the building at around 9:30 p.m., but he disappeared afterward. The case attracted widespread attention in Mexico, and finding those responsible should have been easy. However, the mastermind managed to confuse the investigation, creating a bizarre story that captured the attention of many. Norberto was born in Meoqui, Chihuahua. He was known for being very sociable and charming. He was always ready to help those in need and was well liked by many. Norberto's dream was to move to Mexico City to study marketing at Pedregal University after graduation. Upon arriving in the capital, he lived with his uncles, aunts, and cousins. By the age of 22, his life seemed to be in order. He was dating a girl. On July 4, 2019, Norberto left class at around 9:30 p.m. A surveillance camera recorded him leaving the university parking lot while calmly talking on the phone. Just 15 minutes after he left, his uncles and aunts received a call from his phone. But it was not Norberto on the other end of the line. Another voice informed them that their nephew was being held captive. The young uncle panicked and abruptly hung up. The kidnappers called back, but no one answered. Finally, Norberto's aunt picked up the phone and spoke to the criminals. Their message was clear: to see their nephew Norberto alive. His uncle's family needed to hand over 5 million pesos that night at 10 p.m. The police received a report of a gray Toyota Yaris abandoned in the middle of the road. This was the same model that Norberto owned when the police arrived. They failed to secure the area for potential evidence and did not call in forensic experts to conduct a thorough investigation. This mishandling complicated the case, especially since the car was parked near Norberto's uncle's house, with the keys left on the sidewalk. When Norberto's cousin Osvaldo returned home, he saw the police nearby and informed them that the car belonged to his family. Unfortunately, the police carelessly returned the car to Osvaldo, who was unaware of the troubling events involving his family. At midnight, Osvaldo returned home and received shocking news. He quickly decided to take his father to the police to report the incident. 40 minutes later, the case was officially opened. Meanwhile, Norberto's aunt chose to handle things differently. At 1 a.m., she asked her husband and son to withdraw the complaint, claiming that she had made a deal with the kidnappers. She also negotiated the ransom down to 500 pesos and some jewelry. However, it was too late. The police had already begun their investigation. Meanwhile, the kidnappers made their demands. At 3:30 a.m., Osvaldo was ordered to pay the ransom for Norberto's safe return. They instructed Osvaldo to go to Las Bombas Street, stop at a car wash, collect the money, and throw it behind bars in an empty lot. Osvaldo carefully followed all the instructions. Then the kidnappers informed him that Norberto would be released at the Chalcocan Canal. Osvaldo waited there for hours, but Norberto never arrived. The kidnappers also stopped communicating, and there was no further contact. At 7 in the morning, Osvaldo decided to call the police, who quickly began searching for the missing person. On June 5, at 10 a.m., the Prosecutor General's office officially opened an investigation. Norberto's relatives were summoned to the Ministry of Defense to provide witness statements. Meanwhile, footage from city cameras was reviewed, but no useful information was found. Cameras that may have captured footage of Norberto's abandoned car were thoroughly examined. Unfortunately, they were pointed in the wrong direction. The only camera facing the right direction was broken. The family's desperation quickly spread throughout the country. On June 6th, Norberto did not return home, and news of his disappearance was widely reported. The university then helped raise awareness, leading to media coverage of the kidnapping during his graduation ceremony. Norberto's classmates took the opportunity to rally support for the search. Dressed in caps and gowns, they displayed posters with Norberto's picture, which quickly attracted attention on social media. Norberto's mother traveled to the capital and appeared on several television shows. On June 8, a search was conducted in the areas where Norberto's car had been found. Unfortunately, this search did not uncover any new clues. The kidnappers did not contact anyone. As if they had disappeared, questions about Norberto's whereabouts continued to echo throughout the country for a long time. There was only silence, but that silence was finally broken. On June 9 at 6 p.m., the police received an anonymous tip about a body wrapped in a blanket that had been found in the Xochimilco area. The police quickly arrived at the reported location. The area was deserted, with no surveillance cameras, suggesting that the perpetrators had planned the crime carefully. The police sent the body for an autopsy. On June 10, Norberto's family came to identify the body. His family confirmed that the body found was Norberto. The autopsy revealed that he had died of exhaustion, and there were signs of torture on his body, including a broken nasal septum. As the investigation continued, the case became increasingly puzzling. Forensic experts reported that the body could have been there for 3 to 5 days, suggesting that Norberto may have died on the day he was kidnapped. Despite attempts to negotiate a ransom with the family, the criminals had no plans to release Norberto, however. These are still just theories. As many uncertainties surrounding the case remain, Norberto's body was cremated, and after the funeral, he was flown back to his hometown. The university suspended all academic activities for 3 days. The investigation into his death continues. Norberto's mother has used social media to call for justice and urge safety measures for all young people to prevent tragedies like her son's from happening again. The first to face consequences was the police, who ignored Norberto's car, a potential piece of evidence. Traces of blood were later found inside the car, but were never tested. When Norberto's cousin Osvaldo got into the car to take it to the garage, he accidentally contaminated potential evidence, however. Osvaldo did not know that Norberto was missing at the time and only learned about it when he got home. Since then, the car has not been mentioned again. The Attorney General's office has analyzed more than 20 hours of video from 6 cameras, including state and private cameras. Located near the scene of the incident, it appears that the criminals used 2 cars to carry out the kidnapping. It was revealed that one of the cars was used to distract attention from the criminals and only intervened if any problems arose. The second car was used specifically for the purpose of kidnapping Norberto. The information gathered led to a 2-part investigation. First, it was assumed that the kidnapping was carried out by a Mexican organized crime group known to the media as the Skinheads. This group targeted students from private universities and high schools within a 10-kilometer radius of Xochimilco. One similarity with Norberto's case is that the gang had previously carried out 5 kidnappings, 3 of which resulted in the victims being killed even after their families had paid ransoms. Furthermore, records show that these victims usually died within the first 48 hours of their capture. However, there are some notable characteristics of skinhead gangs. They shave the victim's head before releasing or killing them. In Norberto's case, his head was not shaved, and there was no evidence that he was being held captive. Negotiations between criminal groups and families are common in these types of crimes. Considering this, the police formed a second hypothesis. The crime could have been committed by someone close to the Norberto. they decided to question Norberto's acquaintances. The prosecutor general's office found it suspicious that the ransom was arranged so quickly, in just 20 minutes. And it was hard to believe that the criminals would agree to a discount for the family. It was also strange that Norberto's aunt refused to involve the police. Later, the police interviewed Norberto's girlfriend, aunt, uncle, cousins, and close friends. Finally, a breakthrough occurred. The police noticed that Euritzi's ex-boyfriend seemed to be interfering too much in Norberto and Euritzi's private lives. He often expressed dissatisfaction with their relationship, however. Euritzi and Norberto appeared to be a happy couple, regularly sharing photos of themselves together on social media. The day before Norberto went missing, his girlfriend Euritzi posted a tweet that appeared to be directed at her ex-boyfriend, urging him to stop interfering in her life and focus on his own. The Attorney General's office quickly launched an investigation into Euritzi's ex-boyfriend, but the investigation stalled when he could not be found. Finally, a crucial piece of evidence emerged that had previously been overlooked. The red plaid blanket that had been used to wrap Norberto's body had the name Hernandez embroidered on it, indicating that it belonged to a family with that surname. This raised suspicions about Norberto's maternal family. The Attorney General's office investigated 47 people with the surname Hernandez. Unfortunately, these investigations were fruitless and caused delays. Meanwhile, the most promising lead in the case came from surveillance cameras. When the police reviewed footage from a camera on Las Bombas Street, they saw a white van and a red sedan drive by at 3 a.m., shortly after Osvaldo delivered the ransom, with 3 people getting out of the vehicles. After receiving new information, the police were able to clarify some important details. They quickly identified the red sedan and its owner. This discovery led to several arrests. The first arrest was of Daniel, the owner of the red sedan. In his statement, Daniel explained that he used the car to transport passengers for a private company. He said that the person driving the car that night was actually his friend, Oscar. The police then went to Miguel Hidalgo to find Oscar. When Oscar was arrested, the police found packages containing illegal synthetic substances. They also learned that he had previously been involved in a criminal case. Based on information provided by Daniel and Oscar, the police arrested Jose Fernando, who was also found to have illegal substances. On July 7, more than a month after Norberto's death, the preliminary results of the investigation were released to the public, creating considerable interest. The police stated that one of the suspects was Daniel's cousin, but Daniel's father insisted that he had never heard of Norberto. This raised questions about how Daniel could have known Norberto and why he would plan to kill him. New evidence quickly emerged in the case to expedite the investigation. Oscar appeared in court a few days later and surprisingly confessed to being involved in the crime. They uncovered key details and identified a woman named Euritzi Martinez, Norberto's ex-lover, as the mastermind behind the crime. Euritzi met Norberto about 3 years ago, and they dated for a short time. Romantic photos and messages to her were found on Norberto's Facebook page, and his aunt confirmed their relationship. However, the motive behind Euritzi's involvement in the crime remains unclear. Euritzi asked for Norberto to be kidnapped because he owed her 700 pesos. They planned to demand 5 million pesos from his family after she received the money. The rest would be divided among the kidnappers. Euritzi claimed that Norberto's uncle and aunt owned shops in the Central Market, which would make it easier for them to collect the ransom. However, things quickly spiraled out of control, and Norberto was killed on the night of his kidnapping. The police promptly opened a case against Norberto's ex-girlfriend, Euritzi. Until July 14, she was still active on social media after the arrest warrant for Euritzi was issued. She disappeared. She deleted her social media accounts and turned off her cell phone. A few days later, the investigation revealed that there was no debt between Norberto and Eurydice. It became clear that she only wanted to profit from Norberto's family. On July 28, 2019, Daniel and Oscar were arrested and taken into custody at a pre-trial detention facility. Initially, it seemed that the case was almost solved, with the only remaining task being to find Eurydice. However, during the investigation, the police discovered that Elvia, the owner of the house where Norberto had been held, was involved in the kidnapping. On September 21, Elvia was arrested for unlawful deprivation of liberty following her arrest. New details of the investigation emerged. It was revealed that Elvia was a witch and that the kidnappers had approached her to perform a ritual to assist in the kidnapping. Elvia had voluntarily joined the criminal group, motivated by the prospect of receiving a portion of the ransom. The final arrest in the case occurred on October 22. When the police apprehended Jose Fernando, they sought him for drug trafficking 3 days later. After being taken to prison, Jose was informed that he would also face charges for kidnapping Norberto. This indicated that the case was close to being resolved. However, the family could not achieve full justice because the main instigator, Eurydice Martinez, was still on the run. The Mexico City judiciary found Jose, Daniel, Elvia, and Oscar guilty of kidnapping and murdering Norberto Ronquillo. They were each sentenced to 140 years in prison and ordered to pay more than $1 million pesos in damages. 4 years after the case, Eurydice is still missing. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jenna Burley. Jenna Burley was born on November 4, 1994 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the state capital. Her parents, who had a strong marriage, met while studying at the University of Pennsylvania and have been together ever since. Jenna grew up in a loving environment from a large Catholic family. She loves animals and has a strong desire to help not only her younger siblings, but also others in need, which has motivated her to participate in various volunteer activities. Jenna is a kind, cheerful, and sociable girl. In August 2013, Jenna graduated from high school and chose to attend college in Florida. She was accepted to Temple University, where she quickly became involved in campus life. Jenna joined the women's community, fighting for girls' rights. For her, this was an exciting new chapter in her life. She maintained a close relationship with her family and visited them regularly during winter holidays. Enjoying skiing in her hometown, however, at the age of 19, she had a serious accident while skiing and broke her leg. The injury required surgery to install a pin and a brace. After several surgeries, Jenna tried her best to regain her mobility, but the recovery process was difficult. Eventually, Jenna decided to return to school. Complications arose that required her to be hospitalized. This was a difficult time for Jenna, as the previously active and energetic girl lost the ability to move on her own and was confined to a wheelchair. During this time, she became closer to her friends and family. She also started writing her own blog. In 2014, she published many articles that addressed many social issues and life in a positive way. Jenna aspired to be a designer or ecologist and shared her interests on social media. By 2015, she had realized her long-held dream of creating designer jewelry. She opened a small online store and donated 20% of her earnings to charity. After her trauma, Jenna struggled with her mental health, experiencing a significant depressive episode that led to a stay in a psychiatric hospital. During this time, she wrote about her battle with depression, anxiety, and attention deficit disorder on her blog. Determined not to waste her time recovering at her parents' house, she focused on her studies and graduated from a local college in Montgomery in 2015. Throughout this time, she kept in touch with friends and slowly began to heal. In the fall of 2017, Jenna returned to Temple University to study film and communications, a field she had previously dropped out of due to trauma. However, she transferred to the Philadelphia campus, a city known for its high crime rate. The only safe places were student dorms, and walking around the city after dark was dangerous. Despite the dangers, students often ignored curfews and enjoyed their free time like normal young people. Jenna worked in a store while pursuing her design interests. Unfortunately, she faced a number of setbacks, including a car accident during her first week of school. Fortunately, she suffered only minor injuries and did not require surgery. Her father came to help her with the car after the accident, which occurred on August 30, 2017. The next day, Jenna had some early morning classes, so she decided to stay in school. That Wednesday, her roommate, Davis Train, was throwing a birthday party for a friend. The party coincided with Wild Wednesday, a college tradition that the university community celebrates every week on Wednesdays. Students usually gather at local bars after class to enjoy the evening. Since Jenna's father was visiting, he spent the evening at a restaurant with her before taking her to the party with her friends. It was Jenna's first Wild Wednesday, and she was excited to be a part of it. Jenna spent the evening with several classmates and went to several bars with them. The last place Jenna was seen that night was a sports bar, just a block away from the college campus. The small bar was packed with students. She was there with friends, including Davis. He left around midnight, but had planned to meet Jenna after she finished partying. However, she never showed up. Around 1 in the morning, as the bar was about to close, the group of drunk students began to disperse after returning home. Davis fell asleep while waiting for Jenna to call. When he woke up in the middle of the night and realized Jenna wasn't home, he began to worry. He rushed to his phone and saw several messages from Jenna, including one asking for help, which scared him. He quickly responded, but his message remained unread. Jenna did not return his calls, and since the bar was closed, he thought she might have returned to campus in a taxi. However, Jenna was still missing. He tried calling other students who had been with her that night, but most were either asleep or unaware of what had happened. From the comments of his friends, Davis realized that Jenna was in danger on the streets of Philadelphia. Concerned, he decided to contact Jenna's parents. They understood the seriousness of the situation. Jenna's father began searching for her throughout the night, but unfortunately, his efforts were in vain. Around 9 a.m., the father went to the university's campus security services to ask for help in finding his daughter, Jenna, who had just started her first semester. Unfortunately, the staff was hesitant to take his concerns seriously. They were used to students going missing after a night of partying almost every week, and most of them returned home after sleeping at friends' houses. Concerned parents were advised to wait at least a day, hoping that their daughter would return on her own. Those 24 hours were a long time for Jenna's family. The father hoped that Jenna would come home, or at least call. But his phone remained silent. The next day, he contacted university security again. Officers finally responded to his report, worried. They first reviewed the recordings from the campus surveillance cameras. They discovered that Jenna had not returned to her dorm that night. Officers began interviewing friends and acquaintances of Jenna's who had been with her at the bar. Through these conversations, they learned what she had been wearing on the night of her disappearance. It was clear that Jenna had disappeared off campus, in an area not covered by university security. As a result, the police were brought in to assist in the case. They worked together to investigate the circumstances surrounding Jenna's disappearance. A text message Jenna sent to Davis was alarming. It said she needed help, but did not provide any specific details. The police quickly realized the seriousness of the situation and that they needed to act quickly. They began tracking the geolocation data of Jenna's cell phone. The last time it was active was at a bar around 2 a.m. When Jenna sent a text message to Davis, the police went to the bar to talk to the bartender. An employee recognized Jenna from a photo the police showed him. He reported that she had been sitting at a table until closing time after her friends left. She spent most of the time alone. Looking upset, it seemed like she was waiting for someone or hoping for a response to her text. As she kept checking her phone, unfortunately, it seemed she didn't get any messages. At around 1:30 a.m., a muscular stranger approached her, whispered something in her ear, and sat down at her desk. They drank and began talking. At 2 a.m., the bar closed, the stranger left, and Jenna followed him. The man had probably offered to help her, to give her a ride to school. Jenna probably felt like she had no choice but to accept. The bartender noticed that they were both quite drunk, but neither of them were aggressive or tried to force her to do anything. The bar's surveillance footage corroborated the bartender's story. The police spoke to other employees, and one bartender recognized the man as a regular named Joshua Hupperters. He even had Joshua's phone number. With this information, the police quickly called Joshua, who was likely the last person Jenna had contact with. However, he did not answer, so they left him a voicemail about the situation. The police wanted to speak to him directly, as he could provide important information about Jenna's whereabouts and was an important witness to the investigation. The police began searching for him to ask questions, checking all nearby hospitals and locations where Jenna might be, but she was nowhere to be found. Joshua eventually called the police back after receiving their voicemail. He apologized, explaining that he had slept most of the day after a night at the bar. He claimed that he had had too much to drink. He also did not remember whether he had been drinking alone or buying drinks for others. He did not remember who he spent time with that night. When questioned about Jenna, Joshua claimed that he did not know with Jenna. He tried to convince the police that he did not know who they were referring to. The bartender later confirmed that Joshua was not drunk enough to forget what happened in the bar. Although they had consumed quite a bit of alcohol, they were still on their feet and able to move around, making amnesia unlikely. Joshua buying drinks for Jenna suggests that he may have had an interest in her. Police discovered that he lived just a few minutes' walk from the bar. Police easily located the room he was renting, but had difficulty when Joshua would not open the door. They contacted the apartment owner, who quickly assisted the police by using her key to let them into the room Joshua was staying in. Upon entering the room, the police found Joshua's room to be quite messy, filled with all kinds of papers and documents. During the search, they found a pair of men's shoes with a drop of blood on the heel, along with a roll of toilet paper with a dark red stain that resembled blood. However, the police needed a search warrant to collect evidence for further investigation, so they had to leave the apartment and go to the police station to get the necessary warrant. Meanwhile, Joshua again did not answer the phone because the police lacked concrete evidence against him. Obtaining a warrant could take some time. Police began to suspect Joshua as the prime suspect in the case. During further investigation, police learned that Joshua was 29 years old and born on February 27, 1980. Joshua's father had been murdered in the Philadelphia suburbs, and the case remained unsolved given the circumstances. Joshua may have developed mental health issues. Family friends have mentioned that he struggled after his father's death. However, the police have more troubling suspicions about him. Joshua has a lengthy criminal record that includes drug dealing, alcohol-related offenses, theft, and drunk driving. However, there are no other incidents of violence or assault in his past. On September 1, a young man named Jack Miley contacted the police, claiming to be a friend of Joshua. He said that on August 30, he and Joshua had gone to a bar to meet girls. Jack left the bar at around 1 a.m. with other students and woke up at around 10 a.m. He immediately smelled a strong odor of cleaning products, which made him feel nauseous. Curious about the smell, he found Joshua in the kitchen, screaming on the floor while pouring bleach. Jack noticed a deep scratch on Joshua's neck and a large cut on his arm that looked like a stab wound. Joshua explained that he fell into a thorn bush while drunk and did not remember how he injured himself. At the time, Jack had no idea where Joshua's wound had actually come from. Joshua then went to the hospital to get stitches for the cut. The two young men later met, and Joshua said he was going to North Carolina to visit relatives. This struck Jack as strange. as although he had known Joshua for a long time, he had never heard of any relatives living in another state, and this sudden trip seemed suspicious. After Joshua left, Jack learned of Jenna's disappearance. At that moment, he realized that Joshua's injuries and the blood in the house could be related to Jenna's disappearance, prompting him to go to the police due to many inconsistencies in Jack's testimony. The police began to suspect that he was involved in Jenna's disappearance. He could indeed be involved in the case because he was at the same bar as Joshua and lived with him. Jack was asked by the police to contact Joshua and find out the truth about that night. However, Joshua continued to ignore his phone calls. After a few days, Joshua's phone finally worked, and he answered. He quickly denied Jack's story, saying that he was in South Philadelphia and had not yet arrived in North Carolina. He agreed to meet the police at the station, but unfortunately, he never showed up and disappeared again. To gather more information, FBI agents joined the investigation. They monitored the general area where Joshua had spoken to the police, locating him in the mountains of northeastern Pennsylvania. This indicated that he had been dishonest about his whereabouts. All evidence pointed to him being hiding something and possibly involved in Jenna's disappearance. Joshua was eventually found at his grandmother's house, which was located near a river high in the mountains. When the police arrived to speak with Joshua, he immediately claimed that he had spoken to the police. He had spoken to the police about Jenna at the university. He then went to his grandmother's house to rest. The police knew that he was on leave and had not been to the university for a long time, which indicated that he was lying during the conversation. The police noticed a stitch on his hand and a deep scratch on his neck. As Jack had mentioned, when asked how he had been injured, Joshua said that he had been injured while breaking a cereal bowl. However, the wounds were in areas that did not match his explanation, suggesting that he was not telling the truth. The police then took Joshua and his grandmother to the police station. During the examination, the police discovered deep cuts on his hands, some of which had been stitched up. Their suspicions, combined with inconsistencies in Joshua's testimony, led them to obtain a search warrant for his room near the school. Inside, they found broken plates, including a cereal plate, but no blood on them. In other areas of Joshua's room, they found suspicious, dark red stains, especially on the kitchen sink, trash can, and kitchen knife blade. It appeared that he had tried to clean up, but failed to do so completely. In addition, the police found a black hair tie. This was just the beginning of their disturbing discoveries. They discovered a large amount of illegal drugs, suggesting that Joshua was not just a regular dealer, but a major supplier to the entire university campus. The breakthrough came when they checked a trash can and found a blood-stained sweatshirt identical to the one Jenna had worn on her last outing. Joshua was eventually arrested the same day. Police then received new information. A man contacted the police and reported that Joshua had hired him to transport a large shipment for $200 cash. The informant noticed another man helping Joshua load a heavy plastic container into the trunk of his car. During the night, they drove about 150 kilometers from the city to Joshua's grandmother's house. When they got there, the driver assisted in unloading the plastic container, which Joshua claimed contained university textbooks. This struck the driver as odd. Joshua stated that he was transporting textbooks and clothes, and that his cousin had helped transport a container. Police were then contacted by a man named George Stobo. George went into the barn to check for snakes in the corner of the barn. He discovered a plastic container, which, when opened, revealed the body of a dark-haired girl. George immediately called the police. Officers went to George's house and found Jenna's body. The body was in a terrible state, with 140 wounds that showed signs of brutal beatings. Police spoke to Joshua without revealing that they had discovered Jenna's body. He confirmed that he had moved the container to his grandmother's house, but did not admit to anything. He was nevertheless charged with murder, cruelty, and obstructing an investigation. Joshua still denies all charges against him. The medical examiner concluded that Jenna died from blunt force trauma to the head and strangulation. She had been severely beaten and repeatedly struck with a blunt object. Jenna also had a stab wound to her left hand and a deep cut to her right hand. Male bodily fluids were found on Jenna's body. Police later discovered surveillance footage that showed Jenna and Joshua entering the building, where he rented a room, at 2:32 a.m. the next day. Joshua transported her body in a plastic bin. A witness reported hearing Jenna screaming from Joshua's room. These screams of pain lasted for several minutes before suddenly stopping, but no one called for help or intervened. The question is why Jack, who lived next door, did not hear the screams. Was he an accomplice to the crime, or was he too drunk to realize what had happened? The exact truth remains unclear, as Jack claims he was drunk and did not hear anything. Regardless, there is no evidence implicating him in the murder. The trial began in 2019. At this time, forensic experts thoroughly examined Jenna's body and confirmed that there were male fluids on her body, indicating that she had been abused. However, Joshua claimed that their interaction was consensual. Joshua's lawyer insisted that Jack was the real culprit. However, Jack's sister testified, saying that her brother was completely unaware of the incident because he fell asleep after drinking, making it impossible for anyone to wake him up during the trial. Joshua changed his plea and admitted that he was involved in the desecration of the body, but he maintained his innocence of the murder. After deliberations, the jury found Joshua guilty of murder and related charges. He was sentenced to life without parole, plus an additional 18 years for concealing evidence. His lawyer quickly sought to appeal the sentence, arguing that police did not have the necessary warrant when they first searched Joshua's room. However, the appeal was rejected. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sandra Gallas. Sandra was born on May 15, 1978 in Japan. Her background was a mix of half Japanese, a quarter Hawaiian, and a quarter Portuguese. Sandra had an older brother, Lawrence, who always looked out for her. After Larry retired early from the military, her parents, Larry and Tashi, decided to move to Hawaii. Turns out, Hawaii is Larry's hometown. They settled on the island of Kauai, fulfilling their long-held dream of living in Hawaii. They instantly fell in love with the stunning island and found the locals to be extremely kind and welcoming. By the age of 4, Sandra was practicing gymnastics, and by 5, she was learning the traditional Hawaiian hula dance. She studied very well and became a very beautiful girl. Sociable, cheerful, and active, she made many friends. After graduating from high school, Sandra attended New York University to study journalism. Although she dreamed of becoming a journalist, her life took a different path. As someone from an island, she found New York City overwhelming, with its towering, makes her feel suffocated. She didn't enjoy living there and visited her parents in Hawaii, missing them greatly. After graduating, Sandra returned to Hawaii, where she met Darren Gallas, who was working as a builder at the time. Darren was captivated by Sandra's beauty, and they began dating in 1999. With her parents' blessing, they got married, and Sandra took his last name. They bought their own house on the island of Kauai. They appeared to be a happy, loving family. Sandra and Darren had 2 sons. A year after their wedding, they welcomed their first child, Austin. 2 years later, their youngest son, Braden, was born. Sandra took care of the children and managed the household. She and Darren love their sons very much and always try to do the best for them. However, their relationship gradually deteriorated. In 2005, Sandra discovers Darren has been having affairs with 2 married women. She found their phone numbers among his belongings. After she called them, they confessed to having affairs with Darren. She decided to end the marriage and filed for divorce. She could not bear his infidelity any longer. In June 2005, Darren moved out of the family home, while Sandra and their children remained there. Sandra changes her hairstyle to enter a new phase of life. Sandra started working as a waitress at a restaurant on the island to support herself and her children. Her goal was to become financially independent and no longer rely on Darren. Sandra's kind, polite, and friendly nature made her a favorite among the restaurant's guests and staff. It was there that she met Ryan Shinjo, a chef. He was calm, polite, and courteous, the exact opposite of Darren. As they spent more time together, a romance blossomed. Sandra felt comfortable and at ease with him, something she hadn't had in a long time. Ryan made her happy, and their relationship grew deeper and deeper. On weekends, they would often take trips to Honolulu. And Ryan would shower her with gifts. Sandra's parents were overjoyed to see their daughter happy again after a difficult divorce. Sandra and Ryan had plans to move in together, but unfortunately, those plans were not meant to be. Soon, tragedy struck. On January 25, 2006, 27-year-old Sandra was brutally murdered. That morning, before going to work, Ryan visited her. But when he knocked on the door, there was no answer. This was unusual, because they had agreed that he would stop by to visit her before going to work. He began checking the area around the house to understand what was going on and found that the garage door was closed and the lights were still on, meaning someone must be inside. He thought it was Sandra and that she simply hadn't heard the knocking at the door. Ryan looked out the garage window, and he saw a strange sight inside. Inside the car, Sandra was half lying down and unresponsive. Concerned that she might be suffocating from exhaust fumes, he screamed and called her name. But she did not answer. Panicked, he rushed to a neighbor's house, about half a kilometer away, for help. Together, they managed to open the garage door. Upon entering, he touched Sandra. He found her body was already cold. Immediately, he called 911 to report that Sandra was not showing any signs of life. Sandra, 27, was pronounced dead by paramedics. Police began examining her body, which was found inside the car. She was partially lying down, with her lower body in the driver's seat and her upper body thrown back onto the front passenger seat. It was clear that Sandra had been dead for some time and had been attacked. Her body showed signs of beating and had lacerations on his neck, indicating that she had been murdered. Forensic experts searched the crime scene for evidence, but found none. There were no CCTV cameras or witnesses in the area. Police suspected that Sandra had been trying to escape from someone, as it appeared she had been in a hurry to leave. She had been getting ready quickly, got into the car, but didn't have time to drive away. Instead, she was attacked, knocked down, and strangled. Investigators found no signs of robbery in the house. Valuables were still in their places, and there was no sign of disarray. Sandra was not raped, so what could have been the motive for the murder? Meanwhile, Sandra's parents were visiting their son in Texas and never imagined that something like this would happen to their daughter. In the morning, Sandra's boss called her because she hadn't shown up to work. This worried them, as Sandra was always known to be hardworking and responsible. When her parents tried calling her, she didn't answer. By evening, they received the devastating news about their daughter's murder and rushed back home. The brutal killing shocked everyone on the island. The locals were scared and worried that a serial killer might be on the loose on the island, posing a threat to them. People asked the police to explain, but the authorities reassured the people. They believed it was a crime with a personal motive, meaning it was intentional and targeted. Hawaii generally has a very low crime rate compared to the national average, except for certain disadvantaged areas on the island of Oahu. Detectives were committed to solving the case quickly to reassure the island's residents. Investigators believe the brutal nature of the death suggests a personal motive, so they considered ex-husband and current lovers as suspects. Ryan, the current lover, discovered Sandra's body. Darren, her ex-husband, had a strained relationship with her, and their divorce was nearing finalization. Darren is very sad about their divorce, and he became enraged upon learning about her affair with Ryan. Additionally, Darren and she was embroiled in a heated custody battle, which caused constant conflict. As a result, investigators questioned both suspects, Darren and Ryan, at the scene. First, they interrogated Darren. He stated that the day before the incident, he had picked up the children according to the court-ordered schedule. He took them to kindergarten in the morning, painted his mother's room while they were away, and then picked them up, spending a pleasant time with them. Darren claimed that when Sandra was supposed to pick up the children in the afternoon after work, but instead, the police came to him with bad news about her death. Darren claimed he was not involved in Sandra's death. Even though they are divorced, they still maintain a peaceful relationship and keep in touch for the sake of their children. Initially, he spoke confidently, but his actions showed the opposite. In the middle of the interrogation, he became nervous, confused his statements, and raised the police's suspicions. He could not provide verifiable alibis. At the time of the tragic incident, their children were too young to give statements, being only 3 and 5 years old. According to Darren, he was home alone at the time. But he failed the polygraph test. Turns out, he never called Sandra to check why did she come home late, which was unusual, leading investigators to suspect him of Sandra's murder. A search warrant for his home has been issued. The police discovered that a room remained unpainted, contradicting his claims. This suggested he might have had the opportunity to go to Sandra and kill her. After thoroughly inspecting the house, investigators found nothing relevant to the case. Despite their suspicions, the detective had to let Darren go home. They interviewed people close to he and Sandra, including her parents, all suspected him of having something to do with her death. He was known to be extremely jealous and controlling. He did not want to leave her and opposed the divorce until the last minute. Sandra had no enemies. Her family and relatives believe that Darren is the only person who could be her killer. Sandra's new lover, Ryan, provided an alibi. Although he failed a polygraph test, he was removed from the list of suspects. An autopsy revealed that Sandra died from strangulation, with characteristic marks on her neck and hemorrhages in her eyes. Her body also showed multiple injuries, indicating a painful death. Detectives were convinced that Darren was directly involved in her death, but they lacked the evidence to prove it. 2 years later, Sandra's undershirt was re-examined. During this detailed investigation, DNA was found and sent for analysis. The results revealed that Darren's DNA was present on her undershirt. This led authorities to consider charging him with murder, as it was considered vital evidence. However, the prosecutor decided against pursuing charges due to insufficient evidence. Before the murder, they were in regular contact and saw each other, especially when he came to pick up the children. Therefore, it is possible that his DNA accidentally got on her clothes without being related to the murder. The children, Austin and Braden, lived with their father, Darren. He had been granted full custody. The loss of their mother, Sandra, at such a young age was a significant shock for them. Austin and Braden's maternal grandparents have requested custody of the 2 children, citing Darren's aggressive behavior and his endangerment of the children. They believed he was responsible for Sandra's death and accused him of alienating the children from their grandparents. Despite these accusations, the court awarded full custody to Darren. He later married his new girlfriend, Kyron, and moved on with his life. As time passed, the investigation made no progress. Sandra's parents maintained regular contact with investigators, determined to seek justice for their daughter. From the moment he learned of Sandra's murder, her father vowed to continue to find the culprit so that he could be punished by the law. Thanks to the persistence of Sandra's parents and their close cooperation with the police, the case was eventually solved. The family offered a $20,000 reward to anyone providing information leading to the arrest and conviction of their daughter's killer, but still no one spoke up. It was not until 2012 that a team of investigators was assigned to look into the case. They reviewed all the materials with a fresh perspective and discovered some other details. In the documents, they found letters from Sandra to the attorney handling her divorce. These letters showed that her relationship with Darren was very strained. The letters revealed that she was afraid of his aggressive behavior. He had threatened her, was unhappy about her new relationship, and had harassed her. The most important evidence is the sign that Darren is a fussy person. Sandra mentioned that he was so meticulous and organized in everything he did, to the point that he wrote down in his diary every time she was upset about something, no matter how minor. This information intrigued the police, causing them to return to Darren's house to find and examine the diary. When they found out, they were shocked because he had kept detailed notes of every complaint about Sandra. He recorded every day of their life. For instance, he noted when she was 5 minutes late for a meet or bought the wrong kind of bread. However, there were no entries on the day before the murder, which puzzled the police because they knew he and Sandra had met, making it hard to believe that such a picky person would have no complaints to record. Sandra did not pick up the children on the day she died. Why didn't Darren note this in his diary or try to contact her? Perhaps he already knew she was dead and wouldn't be coming. Darren said he did not remember clearly what happened that day, which is why there is no diary entry for that day, even though he recalls other details clearly. His behavior seemed odd and unbelievable. Researchers speculated that he killed Sandra because he didn't want a divorce. In October 2012, Darren was charged with second-degree murder, with bail set at $1 million. He managed to post bail, allowing him to stay home during the trial preparation. Darren maintained his innocence. His lawyer pointed out that there was no evidence against him except DNA on the clothes, which might have ended up there for legitimate reasons, as he often picked up the children. All other evidence was circumstantial. Despite disagreements with Sandra, but they had reached an agreement on the division of property and shared custody. Therefore, the defense argued Darren had no motive to kill her. Additionally, Darren's attorney asked investigators to turn their attention to Ryan Shinju, who was romantically involved with Sandra at the time of her death. Ryan had a criminal history related to burying illegal substances. However, he denied all accusations against him, citing an alibi for the time of Sandra's death. He also cooperated fully with the investigation. He attributed his past criminal record to youthful mistakes and emphasized that he has not committed any offenses since then and has shown no inclination toward violence. Sandra's relatives and friends, called as witnesses for the prosecution, supported Ryan's statements. They described him as a kind person who Sandra felt very comfortable around. None of them believed Ryan could commit murder, especially since he had no motive. However, they had a different opinion about Darren. Darren was a cruel and domineering. He was someone Sandra feared. She avoided seeing him to avoid angering him. By court order, Sandra was forced to give Darren the opportunity to communicate with the children, even though she did not want to. Ryan added that he and Sandra planned to move in together for her protection against Darren. He suspects Darren is the person behind the crime, although there is no direct evidence. During the trial, Darren was portrayed poorly and was likely to be convicted. On his lawyer's advice, Darren accepted a plea bargain from the prosecution to reduce his sentence. This decision disappointed Sandra's family, but the prosecutor argued that a plea deal was the better option because without enough evidence, Darren could be acquitted. The prosecutor estimated a 50% chance of conviction, so Sandra's family agreed to the plea deal. In May 2018, 12 years after Sandra's murder, Darren pleaded guilty to first-degree assault on his wife, causing serious bodily harm. He did not provide any details about the crime. He was sentenced to imprisonment with the possibility of parole after serving 85% of his sentence. In March 2022, his minimum term was reduced by 6 months. He may be eligible for parole in 8 years, with the earliest release date being May 2, 2026, and the latest May 1, 2028. He is currently serving his sentence in prison. Sandra's parents are still upset by the sentence, considering it unfair that Darren received only 8 to 10 years for a brutal murder. They believe he acted in a calculated, planning everything meticulously. He allegedly cleaned the crime scene thoroughly, wore gloves, and hid all evidence. He also provided a false, claiming he was painting walls, which was later proven untrue. Now that Sandra's parents are over 80, they live a peaceful and steady life. Her father had several heart attacks due to severe stress after losing his daughter. His biggest wish was to see Darren put in jail. Their son, Lawrence, often visits them from Texas. Sandra's parents hope Darren will one day feel remorse for his actions. Sandra lived a respectable life. Her children are now adults, living independently, no contact with maternal family, so little is known about them. Sandra's parents think Darren is the one who turned her children against her and her maternal family. During the trial, Sandra's children, then adults, sided with Darren and his parents. They do not believe that their father killed their mother. They attended all the hearings and, after Darren was convicted, cut ties with their mother's family. They believe that their mother's family put their father in prison. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Affair Elodie Kulik. At around midnight on January 11, 2002, the French Rescue Service received a heartbreaking call. A woman, her voice panicked, screamed that she had been kidnapped. Other voices could be heard in the background before the noise increased, and the attackers took over the phone, cutting off the call forever. The call left the rescue service extremely worried, but the operators were unable to gather any useful information. Attempts to call the number back were unsuccessful as it was either out of coverage or switched off. The situation led to an investigation into one of the most unusual crimes the police had ever encountered. They had no information, not even the name of the caller. The only option was to investigate the mobile phone number, but at the time, the technology could not accurately track the caller's location, so the technology was of no help. In the early morning hours of January 11, 2002, at around 7 a.m., a random driver in the rural area of Picardy made a disturbing discovery. He noticed a car that appeared to have been abandoned in a ditch, with damage to the vehicle and the passenger door open. Concerned that the car had been stolen and abandoned, he called the police. When asked if anyone else was nearby, he replied that there was no one around. After making the call, he continued on his way. Since it was a remote area, it took some time for the police to arrive, and they arrived at the scene around 8 a.m. A Peugeot 106 was found upside down in a ditch, which seemed unusual as there was a clear and safe stretch of highway nearby, making it unlikely that it had ended up there by accident. There were no signs of braking or skidding on the road, suggesting the car had intentionally left the sidewalk at a high rate of speed. The keys were still in the ignition, but there was no sign of the driver or any passengers. Police used the license plate to identify the owner. Affair Elodie Kulik, a 24-year-old bank employee who lived nearby. While investigating the abandoned car, her bag was discovered inside, raising concerns for police. The bag contained her money, cards, and keys, but she had disappeared without a trace. Police went to the bank where the affair worked. Bank employees told them she had not shown up for work that day. They then contacted the local hospital, but there were no reports of any victims matching Affair's description. That morning, Affair's father contacted the police to report her absence. He explained that he had tried calling her cell phone, but she did not answer and did not make contact, which was very unusual for her. Normally, if she had any problems, she would always notify her family if she would be late or unable to come home. However, this time, she did not respond and it appeared that she had disappeared. Police began searching the area where her car was found and decided to release a photo to raise public awareness of her disappearance. On the morning of Saturday, January 12, 2002, a worker from a nearby farm went to a landfill 12 kilometers from the station. In the distance, he saw what he initially thought was a tree trunk. However, as he got closer, he was horrified to discover the disfigured body of a woman. He quickly called the police to report his horrific discovery. When the officers arrived at the scene, they were confronted with a horrifying sight: the partially burned and disfigured body of a young woman, showing clear signs of a violent death. Tests are needed to confirm the identity of the body. The body was discovered nearly 6 kilometers away from where her car was found the previous day, which was unusual. Police noted that this area is not frequented by many visitors. It is isolated and not a tourist destination. This suggests that the suspect is likely a local resident. The crime scene was secured and thoroughly searched for evidence. The gendarme discovered a fresh cigarette, but that may have been discarded by the potential killer. Additionally, a condom containing male fluid was located next to the body. Police focused on finding tire tread marks from any vehicle that might have brought the affair to this location, but they were unsuccessful in locating any. All collected evidence was sent to forensic scientists for analysis. On January 12, the police contacted Affair's parents to inform them of the sad news. When the family learned of the incident, the parents were devastated by their daughter's death. Overwhelmed with grief, the mother attempted to end her life. She survived but fell into a coma, remaining in that state for years until her death in 2011. The desperate father was determined to find his daughter's killer. Affair was a highly intelligent and educated young woman. She studied law in northern France and later returned to her hometown of Péronne. At just 23, she was offered a position at a bank, where she excelled and quickly became the youngest director in the bank's history. She took great pride in her career accomplishments. In addition to her career success, Affair was also very beautiful, with blonde hair and blue eyes. The forensic examination of Affair's car determined that it was traveling at a low speed. There were no signs of collision with another vehicle, raising the possibility that someone inside the car might have deliberately driven it into the ditch. When police checked Affair's mobile phone, they found a call to the local rescue service shortly after midnight. The call ended suddenly after she managed to scream. Police retrieved a 26-second recording filled with noise and unidentified male voices. While this recording did not provide clear evidence, it was notable because it indicated male involvement during the incident. The autopsy results showed that Affair died painfully from strangulation, and DNA evidence indicated that she had been raped. However, this DNA did not match any profiles in the database, suggesting her attacker had no prior criminal history. Police believed that the suspect's careless handling of the DNA would eventually lead him to reveal himself again. However, this assumption raised concerns, as it could result in another victim, so they could not afford to wait. Police organized street patrols and collected DNA samples from all male acquaintances of the affair. If these efforts did not lead to results, the search would expand to the surrounding area near the crime scene. The instincts of the gendarmes proved correct. Just 10 days after finding Affair's body, a police commissioner from another precinct arrested a man named Kirill, who had a history of sexual violence. He was in the area on the night of the disappearance and later attacked another woman, who reported the incident. While Kirill admitted to harassing this woman, Claiming it was just harmless flirting, he denied any involvement in Affair's murder. The investigation of Kirill involved checking his car, which had scratches containing gray paint. This paint matched the color of the Peugeot 106 driven by Affair. DNA samples were taken from Kirill for comparison. However, the analysis showed that the paint did not match Affair's car, and Kirill's DNA did not match any evidence from the crime scene. As a result, Kirill was released, and further inquiries into Affair's acquaintances did not produce any new leads. The case has no prime suspect and no new leads. It seems the investigation has reached a dead end. Meanwhile, Affair's grieving father Jackie remains closely involved in the investigation and begins his own investigations. In order to quickly find the culprit, he ensures that the case is widely reported in the media, hoping that this will lead to new leads. On April 15, 2002, 3 months after Affair's body was discovered, new clues emerged in the case. The police received a detailed report from audio experts who had analyzed the recording of Affair's last call to emergency services. The experts carefully filtered out the background noise and identified 2 distinct male voices among the cries for help. One voice was calm and tried to reassure the victim, while the other, more aggressive, argued that she needed to be killed. They noted that the attackers had a heavy accent typical of an area called Picard, which happened to be close to where Affair's body was found. However, this information did not make the police's task any easier. They still lacked data, and the search for a new suspect was slow, with the assumption that 2 men were involved. After 6 months of unproductive investigation, the police department received a call from a farmer in Turtree. On July 8, 2002, he reported discovering a young girl's body on a haystack while heading to work. The shocking scene also revealed another mutilated body. Forensic experts, horrified by the brutality, noted that her limbs were dislocated and her body showed signs of having been run over by a vehicle. This location was only 30 kilometers away from where Affair had previously been found. The victim was identified as Patricia, a clerk who was known for riding her bicycle. She had gone missing just days before the farmer's discovery. Notably, similar items were found at this crime scene. Patricia was recognized as a beautiful girl who worked in a restaurant in Alberta. It was clear to police that these cases were linked, as such violent incidents had never occurred in this previously peaceful area. Witnesses who saw Patricia shortly before her death reported that a black sedan was following her bicycle on the street. At the time, they did not think much of it. Unfortunately, this was all the information the police could gather. The witnesses could not remember the car's make, model, or license plate. However, the police believed this crime was connected to a previous case, and new information about the black sedan helped narrow down the search. The media quickly picked up the story, increasing public fear and spreading rumors about a possible serial killer. The police's struggle to solve the case led to the discovery of a third body on August 21, 2002. In Villa Brentoni, a van was found abandoned near the railroad tracks. And inside it, police discovered a third young girl who had been wounded by a bladed weapon and died from internal bleeding. Unlike the earlier victims, this girl's identity was unknown because no one had reported her missing. The police spoke with local residents and learned about the parents of a daughter who had not returned home the night before. They thought she was out with friends. Upon investigation, they recognized the victim as their 18-year-old daughter, Crestel. She was killed approximately 40 kilometers from where the first victim was found. In just 7 months, the gendarmes encountered 3 similar murders of young girls, each caught by the criminals at night on roads between settlements. The locations of these crimes on the map created a triangle that the media called the Triangle of Death. This situation caused public anxiety to escalate, leading residents to hold a memorial procession to express their fear for safety. Even with more police patrols and checkpoints, attempts to gather new evidence and testimonies from other potential victims were unsuccessful. However, by the end of November 2002, the investigation into the second Patricia victim's murder produced new leads. DNA found on the victim's clothing identified a suspect named Jean-Paul Conti, marking an important breakthrough for the police. Police arrived to question Conti, a man who had served 17 years in prison for a series of rapes. When he saw the police, he was very surprised. He remained calm and did not attract the attention of those around him. His home was located in the Triangle of Death, which included the locations where the 3 victims were found. Conti was arrested in the early morning of November 25th, but police needed more evidence to link him to the murders. His DNA was only found on the clothing of the second victim, and there were no traces on the first and third victims. The investigation later determined that he was only involved in the murders of the second and third victims, resulting in a life sentence. In addition, it was confirmed that he could not have been involved in the murder of Affair, as he was in prison at the time. This indicates that the cases of Affair and the other victims are unrelated, revealing that there are at least 2 killers operating in the area, targeting young girls. The investigation resumed with meticulous efforts to identify all mobile devices that may have been in the vicinity where the body and a gray Peugeot 106 were discovered. A total of 14,000 signals were recorded and needed analysis. Specialists undertook a massive task that included reviewing over 600 sent messages, listening to more than 10,000 conversations, collecting 5,500 DNA samples from found mobile phones, and conducting thousands of interviews. Police examined over 500 theories related to the crime, but none provided any leads. The department received numerous anonymous letters identifying various individuals as potential killers. Police followed up on these leads, which consumed a lot of resources, but ultimately did not advance the case. After a lengthy period, police offered a reward of €60,000 for information leading to the capture of the real criminal. However, this also failed to yield results, leaving the police at a standstill. 9 years after Affair's body was discovered, a new police officer joined the investigation. He was a young specialist with a fresh perspective and new skills. He suggested a method that focuses on analyzing the DNA found at the crime scene to search for close relatives of the DNA's owner, rather than just the owner themselves. This innovative technique was used for the first time in France in this case and proved to be a significant breakthrough in the investigation. Progress was made in November 2011 when police identified a relative of the killer. Evidence strongly suggested that the killer was part of the Wired family. It was believed that the elderly man was not involved, meaning that the perpetrator was likely his son. The Wired family had lived in the area for nearly 50 years, and their son, Gregory Wired, was a 23-year-old plumber at the time of the murder. To protect the information, police kept his identity a secret for several weeks. However, they were disappointed to discover that Gregory Wired had died in a traffic accident shortly after the Affair murder in November 2003, which was officially ruled a fatal accident. The Gregory's death shortly after Affair's murder explained why his DNA was not found during random sampling of local residents from 2002 to 2010. His profile closely matched the description of the criminal. Gregory, known to his friends as a motorsport racing enthusiast, was cheerful but had a violent streak. He abused alcohol and often lost control when intoxicated, making him prone to aggression. To conduct a DNA examination of the suspect, authorities decided to exhume his body from the cemetery for testing. The results revealed a complete match, identifying one of the killers. The next step for the gendarmerie was to find the owner of the second voice from Affair's last call recording. They began by investigating Gregory's immediate circle. The police aimed not only to piece together the events, but also to ensure that no further threats existed for other young women. While only traces of Gregory were found on the condom at the crime scene, another male voice was clearly captured on the recording. Police then investigated Willie Bardon, a former plumber and bartender who was a close friend of Gregory's. They had many interests in common, and a recording confirmed that it was his voice. Willie lived nearby, and police knew of his past allegations of violence against women, although those incidents did not result in legal action. Witnesses reported that he had chased them in his car. Despite his troubled past, he had no criminal record, which meant that his DNA was not in the police database. He vehemently denied any involvement in the crime and claimed that the police were mistaken. Ultimately, his DNA was not found at the crime scene. In late March 2013, Gregory's ex-girlfriend assisted police in identifying the voices of Gregory and Willie by listening to a recorded phone call. Willie, who had a recognizable accent, was recognized by people who knew him. Despite this evidence, Willie denied any involvement in Affair's death, maintaining his innocence. Some described him as a kind man, a caring husband and father, while others painted a different picture, noting his impulsive behavior, extramarital affairs, alcohol abuse, and repeated advances toward women. Nevertheless, the case against him went to court. The prosecution's case rested largely on the identification of Gregory's girlfriend's voice and several others. Despite the lack of substantial evidence, the court ruled in favor of the prosecution. In 2019, 45-year-old Willie Bardon was convicted of gang rape, kidnapping, and murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. While in custody, he attempted to end his life to prove his innocence. His lawyers quickly filed an appeal, and which was accepted. They argued that the voice on the crucial recording belonged to someone else. Experts analyzed the recording but could not confirm whether it was actually his voice, as it was unclear and discontinuous. This uncertainty raised doubts about the evidence against him. As a result, his conviction was appealed and Willie was acquitted due to insufficient evidence. He was released from prison on September 25, 2020. The story continues. A new trial began, and on July 1, 2021, Willie was convicted again and sentenced to 30 years in prison. His attorney appealed the decision, but the appeal was rejected. The defense team expressed their commitment to doing everything possible to free this innocent man, but he remains in custody. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Nancy DePriest. In February 1998, a visitor arrived at the office of the current governor of Texas. The visitor was a criminal who wanted to confess and cleanse his soul. He began writing letters to the police and the prosecutor's office, attempting to reach out to them for 2 years starting in 1996, but all his attempts were ignored. Eventually, he decided to write directly to the governor. In his letter, he confessed to a crime far more serious than robbery or rape. Over 4 pages, he detailed the murder of a girl named Nancy DePriest, which he had committed in 1988. He urged the governor to take his confession seriously, stating that he had become religious and wanted to confess. 2 men had already been imprisoned based on statements related to a crime they did not commit. Both were falsely accused and unjustly convicted. During the investigation, it came to light that 2 young men had admitted to the murder. While the true killer felt remorse for ruining their lives. He believed that the wrongful convictions were a result of police pressure, which he managed to evade. In 1998, this criminal wrote another letter to the prosecutor's office, confessing to the murder of a young girl and providing numerous details that only the actual murderer would know. The letter caught the attention of the governor, leading to the reopening of the case files to investigate the man's claims, as his conscience began to weigh heavily on him. Police started to re-examine all the case materials and discovered many inconsistencies. The story of the murder began in the year of 1988. On the morning of October 24th, around 9:30 a.m., the administrator arrived on Rent Street in Austin, Texas, to check on her employee, Nancy, who had not answered the phone. Nancy was a manager and was supposed to arrive early to prepare the food. Her husband drove her to the restaurant that day at 7:40 a.m. before going to work. According to the restaurant's schedule, Nancy's last contact with the owner was at 8:30 a.m. when she placed an order for ingredients that were running low. However, when the owner called Nancy at 9 a.m. to check if they were ready to open, Nancy did not answer. Her attempts to call back were met with silence. Worried, the owner decided to go to the restaurant, where she found the back door unlocked, water spilled on the floor, and the mixer running. Everything was eerily quiet, and Nancy was nowhere to be seen. The restaurant owner continued to search and found Nancy in the bathroom, surrounded by her own blood. Her head was severely injured, her eyes were glassy and unfocused. Fortunately, she was still alive, but her wrists were tied with her own bra. Panicked, the restaurant owner immediately called an ambulance. The ambulance arrived, found Nancy alive, and rushed her to the hospital, where doctors did everything they could to save her. Unfortunately, her injuries were too severe to save her. After discussing her condition with the doctors, Nancy's family made the heartbreaking decision to remove her life support. They chose to donate her organs, believing that Nancy would support this choice, ultimately helping to save the lives of many others. Forensic experts found that Nancy had been violently raped before she was shot in the back of the head. DNA evidence was collected from the crime scene and sent to the lab for analysis. The lead police believed that the motive for her murder was robbery, as the cash register from the day before was missing. A year earlier, multiple pizzerias in the Austin area had been robbed, but those incidents happened late at night or after closing hours, and there were no injuries, rapes, or murders. The thieves focused solely on stealing cash from the registers and the business's earnings. Nancy's murder was markedly different from previous robberies in the city. The police discovered multiple hair samples throughout the crime scene, including behind the counter and in the restroom. Her clothing was found in the sink of the women's restroom, indicating a struggle had occurred. The police considered three possible scenarios. First, Nancy might have forgotten to lock the front doors. Second, she could have known the perpetrator and willingly let him in. Third, he might have had access to the establishment and possessed his own key. Rumors about the murder of the pizza shop employee spread quickly throughout Austin, particularly affecting other Pizza Hut locations in the area. All employees were warned about the potential danger. This horrific incident shocked the community, from the victim's family to all Austin residents. Everyone was desperate to know who could harm Nancy, and the public urged the police to apprehend this perpetrator swiftly. Police investigated whether Nancy had any enemies. However, at just 20 years old, Nancy had no known connections to criminals and had never been in trouble with the law. She was a kind, well-liked person from Fort Worth, Texas, and well-known to the locals. No one expected her to be the victim of such violence. Just before the tragedy, Nancy had been married to Todd DePriest, who worked for the United States Air Force. At the time of her death in July 1987, the couple had a daughter, Sylvia. The employees at the restaurant where Nancy worked were stunned by her murder. They described her as a kind and friendly young woman who was happily married and deeply loved her family, including her husband and daughter. As a manager, Nancy was well respected by her colleagues, who viewed her more as a friend or sister. There were no complaints about her work ethic or leadership. Police first investigated the possibility that the attacker had a key to the restaurant. This led them to consider current and former employees, as all the pizza parlors in the chain had the same key system. This greatly expanded the pool of potential suspects. Police focused on the restaurant owner who discovered Nancy's body, but eventually discovered that everyone had an alibi and that there were no suspicious individuals among the employees. The main suspect initially considered was Nancy's husband Todd, but he had a solid alibi. After dropping Nancy off at work, he went directly to his own job, which ruled him out as a suspect. This left police puzzled about who could have attacked Nancy. Her family insisted she would never open the door to a stranger and always kept her doors locked, suggesting that the attacker was someone she knew. The police faced growing pressure from the local community, which was flooded with complaints and demands for a swift resolution. The public's fear heightened, particularly on November 9, 2 weeks after the incident, when the restaurant on Rhin Street reopened. Pizza Hut's management instructed employees to monitor customers closely and to report any suspicious behavior immediately. On the same day, restaurant employees contacted the police to report 2 suspicious individuals. It turned out that these men were Christopher Ochoa, 22, and Richard Danziger, 19, who were employees of Pizza Hut at different locations. The security guard noted that they arrived in a car, parked in the lot, sat in a vehicle for a while, and then came inside to order beer. The 2 young men barely spoke and seemed to be examining the pizzeria suspiciously. When the security guard approached them, he was disturbed by their comments about the murder of Nancy. Christopher and Richard asked if there were any suspects in the case and questioned why there was no security present during the incident. The security guard then asked Richard where he was at the time of the crime, and he replied that he had been working at a different Pizza Hut that morning. Richard believes that there are multiple people involved in the case. The 2 men then raise their beer bottles in a toast, which seems odd to the security guard. The security guard then informs his colleagues of this unusual behavior, prompting them to contact the police with their suspicions. The police quickly identify the young men and check their alibis, which are confirmed. They could not have been at the pizza parlor where Nancy worked that morning. The conversation between the young men and the security guard is also revealing. It is possible that the young men were simply afraid for their safety, as they worked at similar establishments, which prompted them to discuss their concerns with the security guard. However, Christopher and Richard were immediately considered the prime suspects. This was likely due to public pressure and the lack of other suspects for the police. They were well suited to the role of the criminals, as they were likely acquaintances of the girls. They also had keys to the restaurant and had a reputation as good people. They did well in college and worked in a pizza parlor to support themselves, so their loved ones refused to believe that they were involved in the murders. A police officer, Sergeant Hector Palanca, joined the investigation. Hector had actually solved all of his cases. However, there were rumors that he could be less than professional and abused his position. Some claimed that he was willing to use the most extreme measures to obtain confessions. According to rumors, Hector repeatedly beat suspects to obtain confessions. While talking to Hector, Richard revealed that he had heard from co-workers that Nancy was shot in the back of the head with a .2 pistol. He also mentioned that there was a girl's blue apron in the sink, which was blocking the drain and causing the restaurant to flood. Although this information spread quickly among the staff, the police officer found it highly significant. From that point on, the officer became convinced that Richard was the murderer. Hector thought that only the killer would know specific details, like the color of the apron, ignoring that all the staff wore the same uniform. However, aside from his suspicions, the police had no real evidence against Richard. Colleagues verified that Richard was working the morning of the murder, so he was soon released despite the suspicions against him. The police met Christopher at a pizza parlor in another part of town and then brought him to the station to discuss the case. Unlike the previous suspect, Christopher faced a much harsher situation. He was interrogated for hours using aggressive tactics. The officers attempted to intimidate him several times and warned him of the possibility of physical harm and the death penalty, which is legal in Texas. During the interrogation, Christopher cried and tried to prove his innocence, but this only seemed to strengthen the officers' resolve. Despite the intense pressure, the boy maintained his innocence and denied any involvement in the crime. The officers threatened to imprison Christopher with the most violent inmates at the Palanca institution, implying he would face sexual violence if he did not confess. In desperation, Christopher asked what he needed to do to avoid this fate. The police insisted that he admit guilt. Overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion, Christopher falsely confessed that his friend Richard had committed murder. The police recorded his statement. Afterward, Christopher was not allowed to leave. He wanted to go home, but instead, he was taken to the hospital for hair, blood, and other sample collections. Then, he was informed that he couldn't be released because he had signed a statement against Richard and was at risk. Christopher was placed in a hotel and was not allowed to leave his room. The next day, he was brought back to the police station, where they stated that they were certain he was involved in Nancy's murder. He was not a witness, but an accomplice. The nightmare begins again. This time, the police demand a confession from Christopher. He is forced to confess on tape. He repeats the story against his friend, which he was beaten into lying about during the first interrogation. Now, the police force him to say that at the time of the attack, he was also near the Pizza Hut where Nancy worked and was waiting in his friend's car. Of course, they are talking about Richard, who allegedly raped the girl, shot her, and stole the money. Christopher is denied a lawyer during the second interrogation. He has not eaten, drank, or slept properly for days. However, even at this stage, they force him to take a lie detector test. He is forced to answer yes or no questions, not knowing that it is all a scam. As a result of this test, the police falsely accused him of failing a polygraph test in order to further threaten him. Next, the police asserted that they believed he was still in the pizzeria during the massacre and actively participated in the crime. They alleged that the reason for the polygraph test was to prove that Richard was the mastermind behind the crime and that Christopher was his accomplice. Despite the police's insistence on his guilt, Christopher maintained his innocence. They then proposed a deal. If he revealed the truth about what happened, he would serve 60 years in prison instead of facing the death penalty. Additionally, Christopher was promised that if he behaved well in prison, he could eventually be released early. However, if he refused to cooperate, he would face the death penalty. Christopher's answers were recorded on a tape recorder. The police focused on getting a statement that suited their needs. They asked Christopher suggestive questions, suggesting how he should answer. During this time, the recording paused. Then, Officer Hector gave Christopher the answer he wanted and the recording continued. This process took a long time, and the exhausted Christopher continued to resist, although weakly, because he was mentally and physically exhausted. The police became angry and threw a chair against the wall. Hector decided to repeat a tactic he had used just a few days earlier. At that time, Hector brought a typewriter and typed up the statement needed to close the case. Christopher simply signed it. After a few hours, Christopher was taken to the county jail. Over the past 24 hours, he had been interrogated for over 20 hours and spent a week in solitary confinement. In reality, he was being held against his will in a hotel room. Somehow, the purported confession made its way to the police. Although it was clearly false, Christopher signed it, allowing the court to use it as a full confession to Nancy's murder. The document claimed that at approximately 7 a.m., Richard and Christopher went to the Pizza Hut. They had a .22 caliber pistol and used a key to enter the restaurant without any trouble. They found Nancy inside alone, tied her up, and attacked her several times. She was then shot once in the back of the head. Before leaving, they turned on the water to flood the restaurant and destroy the evidence. The day after his forced confession, on November 15th, Richard was arrested while visiting relatives. He was charged with murder and faced the death penalty. After his arrest, the police informed him that they had solved a brutal crime, claiming that the public could now feel safe. Police Hector and others pressured Christopher to give a statement, claiming that they had enough evidence to proceed with the charges. However, the only evidence they actually had was Christopher's confession, which was obtained through torture and psychological pressure. On November 21st, Richard's lawyer, hired by his family, worked hard to argue that the police had illegally obtained a confession. Afterwards, the prosecution began discussing DNA tests, which they claimed matched samples found at the crime scene. The analysis indicated that Christopher could not be ruled out as a potential source of the biological materials found on the Nancy's body. However, the test results did not prove his involvement. It's important to note that the accuracy of DNA testing in the 1980s was much lower than it is today. This meant that expert opinions at the time could not effectively establish guilt. Despite this, the evidence was still presented in the case. Richard maintained his innocence and struggled to understand why his friend Christopher testified against him. The prosecution claimed that a hair found in the pizzeria matched Richard's hair. However, the investigation's findings were inconclusive. The analysis concluded that the material collected was not a follicle, which also indicated that the reliability of the test was very low. The phrasing used in the report was identical to that for Christopher. While Richard could still be considered a potential owner of the found materials, it couldn't be definitively stated that they belonged to him, especially given the low accuracy of the results. This data strengthened the prosecution's argument. Ultimately, the Supreme Court's decision relied heavily on how the prosecutor presented their case. The troubles for the young men do not end there. Christopher's family cannot afford a lawyer, so Christopher is assigned a public defender. Christopher asserts in his defense that his confession was obtained under intense moral pressure from the police, which he finds intolerable. Unfortunately, the lawyer chooses not to investigate this complaint. Instead of defending Christopher's rights, he claims that the only way to avoid the death penalty is to plead guilty. Christopher is asked to testify against Richard. Surprisingly, the lawyer shows little interest in defending Richard and quickly aligns with the prosecution. He is so certain of Richard's guilt that he opposes the investigation and questions the forensic evidence. In a discussion with Christoph, the defense even mentions a witness who claims to have seen Richard at the crime scene, adding to the list of false accusations. Furthermore, the attorney reported that Christopher's fingerprints were found on the murder weapon, so he threatened his client. In fact, the prosecutor's office did not find a gun at all. On April 6, 1989, Richard was charged with armed robbery and rape. For this crime, he could have faced a sentence of 5 to 99 years in prison. However, Christopher believed that the prosecution had shifted its focus and now considered Christopher the murderer, claiming that he had shot Nancy. In fact, the prosecution had enough evidence to convict Richard of murder. At his trial on May 5 of that year, Christopher followed his attorney's advice and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. His cooperation resulted in a life sentence, avoiding the death penalty. Richard's trial started on January 22, 1990, and it attracted significant public attention. The courtroom was filled to capacity, creating an intense atmosphere where attendees seemed eager for immediate justice against the defendants. They were brought to court wearing bulletproof vests due to concerns over potential violence. After hearing the testimonies, the jury deliberated for just 7 minutes before finding Richard guilty of rape and related charges, resulting in a life sentence. Nancy's family expressed satisfaction with the verdict. Over a year later, it was revealed that Richard was wrongfully convicted for a crime he did not commit. During this time, he had been the victim of a brutal attack, where he was severely beaten and suffered a serious head injury that required part of his brain to be removed. Although Richard survived, he was left disabled for life. At 22, he was moved to a specialized care facility where he received 24-hour assistance, as he was no longer able to care for himself. On that significant day, the leadership of the Austin police focused on Detective Hector Palanca. It became clear that he was abusing his powers systematically, as confirmed by other department employees. There was even video evidence of Hector torturing and physically abusing a suspect to force confessions. As a result, he was initially removed from his position. However, he was later reinstated and continued to harass both guilty and innocent individuals for many years. The damage caused by Hector to the law enforcement system is hard to comprehend. One case alone led to an innocent young man being sentenced to life in prison, while another victim was left permanently disabled. Shockingly, their cases remained unexamined until 1998. The Nancy DePriest case was long considered resolved, and no one had revisited it. This situation changed when Akeem Marina stepped in and sent a letter of confession to the governor, requesting that he reach out to the lawyers. Akeem's letter to the governor's office provided information that could help the police gather physical evidence. He claimed that the handcuffs and bag used in the attack could be found at his parents' home. In addition, the gun that shot Nancy had been confiscated during his arrest for other crimes. The police eventually took the letter seriously and began investigating the case. After reviewing the information, the police were able to confirm the criminal's claims. With more evidence in the archives, they approached Christopher, who was serving a sentence in prison. At first, Christopher was skeptical about the police visit and thought they might be trying to frame him for another crime. As a result, he chose to stick to the false story he had previously confessed to, a story influenced by Officer Hector, and did not provide any useful information. Eventually, Christopher discovered that the police wanted to talk to him because of a letter from Akeem, in which Akeem had confessed to the crime. This news gave Christopher hope that he could prove his innocence and possibly be released. However, he no longer had faith in the justice system. In June 1999, he contacted a project called Innocence. In his letter, he explained his situation, and when activists from the project contacted the police, the district attorney reviewed the case documents. In August 2000, DNA samples were taken from Akeem, whose conscience was tormenting him. Multiple tests were conducted, the results of which clearly showed that Akeem had indeed raped Nancy, and that Christopher and Richard had absolutely nothing to do with the crime. A ballistics test confirmed that the shot that killed Nancy had been fired from the gun confiscated from Akeem. This news shocked everyone, including Nancy's family. Officer Hector Palenka was fired from the police force and retired, and it was eventually decided that the case would be re-examined. On January 16, 2001, a Texas court overturned the convictions of Christopher and Richard, whose lives had been irreparably damaged. In court, Nancy's mother sat next to Christopher's mother, holding her hand. During the trial, Christopher admitted that under pressure from Hector Palenka, he broke down and confessed to a crime he did not commit, dragging his friend Richard into the lie. Akeem, the author of the letter, testified at trial. He claimed that he killed Nancy because he was driven to human sacrifice by voices in his head. He admitted to stealing a work uniform from another restaurant and wearing it the day he knocked on the door of the Pizza Hut where Nancy worked. Believing that he was a coworker from the same restaurant chain coming to her aid, she opened the door without fear, where he then pointed a gun at her. He demanded money and took her into the bathroom, where he raped and killed her. Akeem testified that during the attack, he pulled out a gun and pointed it at the back of her head. According to his confession, he raped her 8 times before shooting her. During the trial, Akeem revealed that he had heard voices since childhood, but they completely disappeared when he converted to Christianity while in prison. He expressed a strong desire to atone for his sins and confessed to the crime. The prosecutor's office initially wanted him to face the death penalty but eventually asked for life in prison. The judge agreed, and Akeem received 3 life sentences. An investigation was then launched into the 3 police officers who questioned Christopher and Richard, but they faced no significant consequences. Christopher and Richard were eventually found not guilty, and their convictions were overturned, leading to their release. Their families were in disbelief. Christopher shared that he often cried at night in prison, unable to understand why he was there. Both men consistently claimed their innocence, yet no one believed them. The families of Christopher and Richard were furious about the unfair 12-year sentences, which had shattered their lives. Lawyers for the wrongfully convicted filed lawsuits, resulting in financial settlements. Richard received a total of $10.25 million, $9 million from the city, $1 million from the county, and $250,000 from the state. Christopher was awarded $5.3 million, and out of a sense of guilt, he donated $500,000 to Richard. Unfortunately, Richard's condition could not improve due to the traumatic brain injury he sustained. He required lifelong care and experienced mental health issues, along with partial recovery on the left side of his body. Richard spent his remaining days surrounded by loved ones who cared for him. He passed away from cancer in 2021 at the age of 50. Christopher was released after spending 12 years in prison. He pursued higher education and established a legal practice, offering many free consultations to those in need. Details about his personal life remain unknown. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kelly Dwyer. Kelly Dwyer was born in 1986 in Lincolnshire, a suburb of Chicago, to a loving family. In 2002, when Kelly was 16, her parents decided to divorce, but they remained on friendliness terms for her sake. The divorce was a traumatic incident that significantly impacted her life. A year later, she graduated from high school, but she unsure of her future plans. She took a break before college and worked part-time at a restaurant. In 2008, at 22, Kelly made a big decision to move to another city to start a new life. She chose Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which was about an hour from Chicago and reminded her of her hometown. The city was the largest in Wisconsin in terms of population, offering great opportunities. Kelly quickly made new friends, attended college, and got a job as a yoga instructor to pay for her tuition and accommodation. She also worked occasionally as a babysitter to tackle financial difficulties. As a child, Kelly loved visiting all the trendy, interesting, and popular places in the city. She enjoyed her life new and was making big plans for the future. The last time Kelly saw her father was a month before she disappeared, when he visited her in Milwaukee. At that time, Kelly had graduated and was working as a yoga instructor and sales clerk in a sports store. Her friends and co-workers admired her upbeat and fun personality. Kelly appeared to be happy and content with her life. She loved her job and had been in a relationship with Chris Sacco for a year. Chris was a 38-year-old successful IT manager at a trucking company. He graduated from Boston University in 2009 with a degree in international business. He had moved from New York City to Milwaukee for his job. Chris was a hardworking, decent person and have a good family. Both Kelly and Chris shared a love for sports and entertainment, seemed they like a perfect couple. Chris was already enjoying a successful career, a luxurious apartment, an expensive car, and a reasonable fortune that he had earned independently. During the investigation, detectives found that Kelly had no enemies or anyone wishing her harm. All her belongings were left at home, which ruled out the possibility of her running away. What was troubling was the complete lack of activity on her bank accounts and phone. This led police to speculate that she might be in danger. The last person to see her on October 10, 2013, was her boyfriend Chris, so the investigators asked him to come to the station for an interrogation. Chris explained that they met at his luxury apartment in Lafayette Towers, spent some time there, and left around 8 p.m. They then went to a small bar across the street from his apartment, where Chris and Kelly mingled with others and enjoyed a drink. In good spirits, they returned to his apartment around 2:30 a.m. and went to bed. Kelly left at 9 a.m., and they never saw each other again. Chris emphasized that he did not consider Kelly his girlfriend. They had an open relationship, and he was truly in love with another woman. This made the investigators curious. While Chris's story seemed quite believable, something about his words and behavior was suspicious, prompting the police to scrutinize him more closely. Detectives interviewed friends who were with Chris and Kelly that night. The friends confirmed that they all had a great time together. First, they went to the bar, and then they went outside, ordered a pizza because they were hungry, and ate it on a bench. Kelly was in a good mood and shared her plans for her day off, which included catching up on sleep, doing yoga, doing laundry, and resting. Later, Chris and Kelly went home, and they invited a friend over for another drink. The friend said she felt uncomfortable in Chris's apartment. She had a few drinks and later decided to leave. That night, Chris was smoking and chatting with a friend, while Kelly seemed a bit down. The friend thought Kelly was just tired and decided to leave the apartment to give them space. After speaking with Kelly's other girlfriends, the investigator discovered that the relationship between Chris and Kelly was not as good as it appeared. Kelly was genuinely in love with Chris, but he didn't seem as invested. Chris wasn't making any plans for a future together, which concerned Kelly. She suspected he might be having an affair and thought they might break up soon. As a result, Kelly felt there was no future with Chris and began looking for other options. She signed up for a dating site and began chatting with different guys, although she hadn't met them in person yet. Kelly's friends pointed out that they had seen bruises on her arms and neck. Curiously, when they asked about the bruises, Kelly always turned it into a joke, called it a crazy night, and immediately changed the subject. Her friends suspected these could be signs of violence, but Kelly never confirmed this thing. By that time, CCTV footage from Chris's house had been reviewed. It showed Chris and Kelly returning drunk to the apartment at night. But Kelly was never seen leaving. This footage contradicted Chris's claim that Kelly left his home at 9 a.m. the following morning. Turns out another friend of Chris had been in the apartment that night and said he'd done substances with Chris. With this information, the detectives got a search warrant for the apartment and went to Chris's house. Inside, they found various substances, pills, pipes, and other items, and arrested Chris for possession. The detectives also noticed something odd: a torn curtain in the bathroom. The curtain was missing, and the hooks where it hung were damaged, as if the curtain had been forcefully ripped off. During the interrogation, Chris appeared calm and confirmed that he had used substances, but he denied trading them. The police accessed Chris's cell phone and started investigating it. They found frightening materials, photos of a naked, unconscious girl on his bed, as well as a video of Chris sexually abusing the girl and seemingly strangling her. They suspicions that Chris was drugging the girl to take advantage of her. These materials were included as evidence in the case of Kelly's disappearance. The police went back to Chris's apartment with a cadaver-sniffing dog. The dog signaled at the bed and the bathroom in the apartment, and then pointed towards the front door. Later, it led the officers to Chris's car in the parking lot, as well as to some trash bins. By then, the investigators were already sure that the missing person was dead, and Chris became the main suspect in the case. She spent the last minutes of her life in his apartment, and then he took her body out and transported it in a car. It's still not known how Chris managed to discreetly get Kelly's body into the car without being caught by any of the 28 security cameras. While the police continued investigating, they checked Chris's computer and found explicit photos of babies. He was charged with possession of this material. At that time, Chris was out on bail awaiting trial, and investigators were still looking for evidence and Kelly's body to charge him. Remembering what Chris had told them about another girl he was secretly dating, detectives began to look into his double life. The young woman was named Megan, and she had been dating Chris for about 3 years. However, Megan doesn't know that Kelly is involved in Chris's life. The detectives went to talk to Megan and showed her photos of Chris's apartment. Upon examining them closely, Megan realized that some things were missing. In the bathroom, there was no shower curtain, rug, or several towels. In the bedroom, a large golf bag that was always kept there was missing. Based on the description, the detectives assumed that Kelly's body could have fit in such a bag. After reviewing all the building's entrances and exits, the police determined that Chris could have used an alternative path to reach the car without being seen. It seems he had thoroughly studied the house beforehand to plan this path. Parking lot camera footage captured Chris arriving with a large bag, which he placed in the trunk. He drove away from the house at 10:06 a.m. on October 11th, and at 10:08 a.m., Kelly's phone was permanently disconnected at the same location. Over the following 8 hours, footage showed Chris returning to the house multiple times, loading items into his car, finally he leaving at 6:16 p.m. He did not come back until the next day. When investigators asked him about the items he was transporting, Chris claimed he was moving his summer sports equipment to his mother's house. However, no one believed his explanation. That day at 7:30 p.m., Chris was supposed to meet Megan. However, she reported that he was over an hour late. Detectives suspected that during this time, Chris was searching for a place to dispose of Kelly's body, which explained his tardiness. Tracking Chris's movements was impossible because his phone had been turned off since the morning. Being an experienced IT professional, Chris likely knew that keeping his phone on would make police it easy to trace his location through phone records. Megan testified that Chris was acting differently that night. He appeared agitated and nervous. He was fiddling with his phone and said it wasn't working, which made him late. After their date, they went to Megan's apartment and stayed the night. Chris was so stressed that he couldn't sleep and was sweating heavily, so much so that Megan had to change the sheets in the morning. The investigators believed Chris was anxious because Kelly's body was still in his trunk, making him fearful of being discovered. He was trying to find a place to hide Kelly's remains. On the morning of October 12th, he said goodbye to Megan and departed. Earlier, he had tried to persuade Megan to urgently move with him to another city, Denver, but she declined. The police officers tracked Chris's location using the car's GPS and found that he was heading to a place called Cheese House, a cheese store located 130 kilometers from Milwaukee. It seemed unusual for Chris to drive such a long distance early in the morning just to buy cheese. However, Chris claimed he went there to purchase cheese for his parents, and he even had a receipt showing a purchase at 9:55 a.m. on October 12th. His parents confirmed he had indeed brought them cheese. Still, it was hard to believe his story, because the same type of cheese could easily have been bought at a local supermarket nearby. The police suspected this area was where Chris had hidden Kelly's body. It was later revealed that Chris stopped at a sports store around noon on his way back and bought new sneakers, which raised suspicions. Detectives thought this was intentional. They believed Chris wanted to dispose of an old pair of shoes because it might have blood on them, or at the spot where he hid Kelly's body there may have been footprints from his old sneakers. Chris considered everything carefully and got rid of all the evidence, creating an alibi for himself. He is very good at analysis and wanted to commit the perfect crime, but the investigators were able to prove he was lying. The distance from the cheese store to the sports shop was about 80 kilometers, a trip he would have made in around an hour. So why did he show up at the store more than 2 hours later? All signs pointed to him doing something else for another hour, probably hiding the body. Police believe Chris hid the bag containing Kelly's body somewhere along the route and disposed of it there. The police were looking for Kelly, but without a specific location, the search was difficult and inconclusive. The entire 80 kilometers route was the search area, which was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Meanwhile, in November 2014, Chris Sacco went on trial for possessing illegal substances and explicit photos of children. He pleaded guilty and received a 19-year prison sentence. The roadside search continued, and they eventually succeeded. A local resident walking in a wooded area about 60 kilometers from the city discovered human remains near the road. Dental records later confirmed them as those of Kelly Dwyer. The resident quickly reported the discovery to the sheriff's office, who immediately suspected it was Kelly's body, which they had been searching for in that area for a long time. The discovery finally ended the search for Kelly, bringing some peace to her parents after a year and a half. Now, they needed to seek justice for her and determine the exact cause of death. The cause could not be identified from the skeleton alone. The medical examiner suggested that the girl might have been strangled, but the force was not strong enough, so the hyoid bone was not broken. There was no evidence at the location where the body was found, no torn curtain, mat, towels, or even a bag. However, the position of the body was unusual. The skeleton was found face down, with one arm under the torso, and the legs bent, suggesting the body had been in a narrow space for some time after death. This further confirmed that Kelly had been hidden in that golf bag. Chris was seen on his home cameras with the bag and also driving down the road with it, disposing of the body, but all of this was circumstantial evidence. There was no direct proof that Chris had committed the crime, so the detectives continued to investigate the case. They were not in a rush because he was already in jail. It was not until 5 years after Kelly's disappearance that he was finally charged. The charges were negligent homicide and hiding the body. The police could not prove that the murder was planned in advance. They believed that on that night, the situation was similar to what investigators found in a video. Chris became intimate with her, lost control during strangulation, and accidentally killed her. He then tore down the bathroom curtain, rug, and towels, wrapped the body, put it in a bag, thoroughly cleaned the house, and disposed of the body. Chris claimed he was innocent of Kelly's murder. During the trial, CCTV footage was shown, along with a video from Chris's cell phone capturing the strangulation, and evidence from a canine inspection of his apartment was presented. Megan, who testified against him, stated he was unusually nervous and late for a meet on that day. Chris's ex-girlfriends also testified, saying he had a disturbing fascination with choking in rough sex, which frightened them. The defense argued that there was no direct evidence against Chris and that the prosecution judge was based on speculation. They highlighted that Chris had no previous arrests or convictions, except for a substance possession case. He was a successful IT professional and valued employee with a respectable family, and they contended he was not capable of murder. Not all CCTV recordings were preserved before the trial, so the prosecution couldn't prove for sure that Kelly hadn't left the house. The defense even brought forward a witness during the trial who claimed to have seen a girl who looked like Kelly the weekend after she disappeared, in another man's car. They had seen her picture on TV as a missing person, but the witness wasn't completely sure it was her. All of this led the lawyer to hypothesize that Kelly left Chris' apartment and was then set up by one of her new boyfriends met through the dating website. The defense counsel argued that there is no way to confirm what exactly the dog detected because there is no video recording. As a result, which could be subjective. In contrast, the prosecution countered that the observe was conducted as objectively as possible, with many police officers present, and they all agreed on the results. At that time, Kelly had already stopped communicating, was not answering calls or messages, and was not active on social media, which was unusual for her, suggesting she was already dead. The prosecutor persuaded the jury that Chris was responsible for the murder. Chris was the only one who could have done it, and he cleverly planned everything and disposed of the evidence, leaving no direct proof of his involvement. The jury deliberated for a long time but ultimately found Chris Zacco guilty of first-degree negligent homicide and concealing the body. Kelly's family and the prosecution requested the maximum sentence of 48 years in prison, while the defense attorney asked for the sentence to be reduced to 22 years. In December 2018, Chris Zacco, aged 43, was sentenced to 31 years in prison, 26 years for manslaughter and 5 years for concealing the body. He is currently held at the Green Bay Correctional Facility in Wisconsin. He will be eligible for parole in 2065 at the age of 90. Chris attempted to appeal the sentence, but his appeals were denied. Kelly's family is satisfied with the sentence, as it effectively means he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Polly Klaas. Polly Hannah Klaas was born on January 3, 1981, in Fairfax, California, USA. Her family included her father Mark, mother Eva, and younger sister Annie. After her parents' divorce when she was very young, Polly and Annie lived with their mother in Petaluma, California. As for Mark, he had a new relationship after the divorce, and Polly got along very well with this woman. Overall, their family was very harmonious, and she spent time with both her mother and father, with no problems between them. Polly was a quiet and innocent child who had a few close friends but was generally very shy. However, she found confidence and joy in theater, participating in various school plays and community musicals where she often took the lead role. Her main aspiration is to become a talented musical theater actress. Aside from theater, Polly loves hosting and attending sleepovers with her friends, a regular activity shared among her close-knit group. On October 1, 1993, Polly asked her mother if she could have two friends, Jillian and Kate, over for a sleepover. Her mother agreed, and the two friends arrived at Polly's house in the afternoon. They had dinner together, and the evening went smoothly until Polly's mother went to bed around 9:45 p.m. due to a bad headache. She told the girls that she was going to sleep and asked them to wake her up if they needed any help at any time. After taking 2 sleeping pills, she fell into a deep sleep. The calm night was disrupted after 11 p.m. when Eva, Polly's mother, was jolted awake by the screams of Jillian and Kate. The two girls frantically told her that a man had broken into the house and taken Polly away. Eva made an emergency call to the police and then went to check on her other daughter, Annie, who was in her room, seemingly unaware of the incident. When the police arrived, they started questioning Polly's 2 friends, Jillian and Kate. The girls explained they were in a room, select on a Halloween costume and just having fun. As the night wore on, around 11 p.m., Polly suggested it was time to go to bed, and her friends agreed. She offered to get the inflatable bed she and her mom had set up earlier so the 3 could sleep together. However, when Polly opened the door to her room, a man was standing in front of them, holding a knife and not wearing a mask. Since Halloween approached, 3 girls initially thought man's threatening claims were a prank and burst into laughter. However, the man's facial expression quickly turned to anger, causing them to realize the situation was more serious. He swiftly forcing the girls into a room, where he bound their hands and feet with rope. When questioned about who lived in the house, all 3 girls, including Jillian and Kate, provided the same answer: Polly. Next, the man removed the pillowcases from the pillows and placed them over Jillian and Kate's heads, preventing them from seeing. He instructed the girls to count up to 1,000, assuring them that he would temporarily take Polly away but return her shortly. Unbeknownst to the man, the girls peered through gaps in the pillowcases and noticed his swift departure. Then, they attempted to release themselves from the restraints. After about 30 minutes of struggle, they managed to break free. Upon escaping the room, they immediately sought out Eva to inform her that her daughter Polly had been taken by the man. Jillian and Kate provided the police with a detailed account of the events. They also gave a brief description of the man, who had not worn a mask and covered his face, allowing the girls to get a clear look at him. As a result, the police were able to create a sketch of the suspect to aid in the search. The investigation at Polly's house did not yield much evidence. Several footprints were found, but they all belonged to Polly, her family members, or friends who had visited the house recently. However, some unusual fibers were discovered on the carpet, which did not match the carpet in Polly's house. Further analysis revealed that these fibers likely came from the carpet of a vehicle. The police then analyzed the cars of individuals who were known to the family and had visited the house, but none of them matched the fibers. This led to the assumption that the fibers were from the kidnapper's vehicle. A palm print was discovered at the scene. At that time, fingerprinting and DNA technology had not yet advanced to the point where it could be compared to a database. However, the print was preserved for potential future use if a suspect was later identified. In Polly's room, a piece of fabric resembling silk was also found. The fabric had a distinctive pattern and appeared to have been cut from a garment with scissors. The police believed this fabric could serve as a valuable clue in the future. A hair was discovered, but its origin remained unknown since DNA analysis was not advanced enough to thoroughly examine it at the time. Polly's case generated one of the largest searches in the United States at that time. Thousands of volunteers joined the search, with 4,000 people combing neighborhoods, vacant lots, and large estates near her home. The police also attempted to locate drivers matching the suspect's description, but all did not bring any results. The police had a narrow 24-hour window to locate Polly after her disappearance, as chances of finding her alive would significantly decrease beyond that time frame. To expedite the investigation, they handed the case over to the FBI and launched an urgent search. However, as the days went by, hopes of a safe recovery of Polly began to dwindle. During the investigation, police inquired about witnesses in the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual on the night of the abduction. Several neighbors reported seeing a suspicious individual lurking around the area, describing him as peculiar-looking. They didn't think much of it at the time because they had no reason to believe the man was capable of committing a serious crime like kidnapping. As a result, they failed to report the incident to the authorities. The police shared a sketch of the suspect with the neighbors, based on a description provided by Polly's friends. The neighbors all recognized the man in the sketch. In a separate investigation, the police also questioned the teachers and staff at Polly's school to see if anyone knew the man or had any information about Polly's disappearance. Unfortunately, no one at the school had any knowledge about the man or the incident surrounding Polly's disappearance. The staff members all had alibis for the time in question and none of them matched the description or resembled the sketch of suspects. The police have conducted a thorough and comprehensive investigation of the case, they comparing a fiber found in Polly's house to the car mats of teachers and school staff vehicles, but unfortunately, no matches were found. Over time, feelings of hopelessness and fear grew, not only for Polly's family but also for the authorities and the general public. Everyone is concerned about the threat this criminal may pose to society, so they demand that the police quickly solve the case. To gather more information, a $200,000 reward was offered to anyone providing information that could aid in locating Polly. This reward was funded by actress Winona Ryder, who also held a press conference to publicly appeal kidnapper for Polly's safe return. At the time, the internet was still in its early stages, and law enforcement agencies, including the police and the FBI, were unfamiliar with using the internet to locate missing persons. To assist in the investigation, 3 individuals from California took matters into their own hands. They created and posted a picture of Polly, a sketch of her suspected kidnapper, and an advertisement for a reward for any information that could lead to her safe return. Although social media platforms did not exist at the time, other online communication tools were available. As a result, approximately 25 million people in the United States viewed Polly's picture online. Initially, FBI investigators believed that the internet could play a crucial role in the investigation. Although the disappearance became increasingly well known, but internet users do not bring any valuable information. However, this has attracted many volunteers to help, and telephone switchboards were established with hundreds of information every day. This thing also bring hope in the families of other missing children, who reached out to Polly's family to support and assistance, hoping that by working together, they might be able to find their own missing children. The investigators were growing increasingly frustrated. It has been many weeks since Polly was kidnapped, and they had yet to uncover any leads. The identity of the kidnapper remained a mystery, and without any DNA evidence, they were unable to make a match. Not even a hair or palm print had been left found, leaving them feeling helpless. Finally, a new breakthrough in the case has come. A phone call was called to Polly's father, Mark. On the other end of the line, he heard a girl's voice that sounded uncannily like his daughter's. She claimed to be Polly and told Mark that she was being held at a hotel. The kidnapper had momentarily left her alone, and that's why she was able to contact he. However, before Mark could glean any more information, the girl hung up. Mark immediately rushed to the police station to tell the news. Unfortunately, the FBI at the time lacked the advanced technology to track a call that had already been disconnected. All they could do was wait anxiously for the kidnapper to make another move, so they can only sit and wait for a new call, hoping to trace it. A few hours after the first call, the same girl who had spoken to Mark called again. The police managed to trace the call, but found it odd that the location was not a hotel, as the girl claimed, but a residential neighborhood. When officers arrived and knocked on the door of the house where the call originated, they discovered it was a prank. It turned out a teenage girl, close to Polly's age, lived there, so their voices were similar. She explained that her friends had dared her to do it. The girl was not arrested or taken to the police station. Instead, her parents were advised to monitor her behavior and remind her not to joke about such serious issues. On November 28, 1993, nearly 2 months after Polly disappeared, police received a call from a woman. She reported that she found 3 suspicious items on a several-acre plot of land she owned. The police, along with the FBI, went to the location and found 3 critical pieces of evidence: a piece of silk identical to one in Polly's room, a pair of ballet shoes that Eva claimed were missing from the house the night Polly vanished, and some duct tape. These evidence led the police to suspect that Polly might have been in the area. Before all this evidence was discovered, on the day Polly disappeared, the same woman went to the police to report a problem. Strangers had been wandering onto her plot of land. She owned a lot of land, which was mostly forest, and had only one small house inside. Although there were signs indicating it was private property, there was no fence to keep people out, so many unknowingly crossed onto her land. Although her land had many intruders, but one particular out in her memory. On the night Polly was abducted, a man drove up to her house in his car, which got stuck in the mud. The nanny, who was caring for the woman's son, was the first to notice the man but didn't approach him because she was too scared. The homeowner also didn't approach him, as she thought he looked angry. They decided to call the police. When the officers arrived, they interrogated the man about why he was there. He explained that he hadn't realized it was private property and promised to leave quickly. However, he requested their assistance in getting his car out of the mud. The officers noticed that the man seemed very nervous, scared, and sweaty, and he also appeared to be under the influence of drugs. Since they were unable to conduct a drug test at the time and the man was not acting aggressively, they were unable to arrest him. The officers helped him out of the mud, and he eventually drove away. This man was Richard Allen Davis, born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. His childhood was troubled due to the violence inflicted by his parents. When he was 12, his parents separated. His mother completely disowned him, saying she wanted nothing to do with him, and left him with his father. Richard's father was very irresponsible, often leaving the house for hours or even days. Richard was frequently left alone, sometimes staying with neighbors and sometimes staying with some of his relatives. During his teenage years, Richard began engaging in criminal activities such as stealing and fighting, which led to several months in reform school. At 17, Richard committed a violent robbery that almost resulted in the victim's death. The judge offered him a choice: go to reform school or join the U.S. Army. Richard chose the Army but was dishonorably discharged in less than 2 years. As he grew older, his criminal record grew longer. Around the age of 20, he was sentenced to 15 years for robbery and kidnapping, but was released after 1 year on parole for good behavior. During that period, Richard was troubled by another accusation. Many of his friends suspected him of killing a 19-year-old girl named Marlene, even though the police acknowledged that she had left voluntarily. However, those close to Marlene believed Richard was responsible for her death, occurring the night they attended a party together. These were merely rumors, with no evidence to support them. When Polly went missing, Richard was having a difficult time, and he had no fixed address, so his whereabouts were unclear. The police distributed a special leaflet exclusively to officers, urging them to be extremely cautious. They withheld information from the media due to concerns that Richard might flee California or even the United States. On November 13, 1993, Richard was arrested while driving under the influence of alcohol. A police officer stopped him, and he failed a breathalyzer test. Upon checking Richard's name and picture, the officer recognized him as the suspect wanted in the Polly kidnapping case. The officer carefully informed Richard that he was being arrested for violating probation due to drunk driving. Richard complied and was taken to the police station. There, officers read him his rights and revealed that he was actually being held for the kidnapping of Polly. Richard was taken in for questioning. The investigation was careful and he eventually admitted to kidnapping Polly. His palm print matched exactly with the one found at Polly's house, and carpet fibers from his car matched those found in the house. Polly's friends were brought to the police station for questioning and immediately identified Richard as the kidnapper. Additionally, a piece of silk identical to one found in Polly's room was discovered in his car and on the piece of land of the woman who reported the incident to the police. All evidence pointed to Richard, leading he to finally confess. He explained that he had been using substances with friends that day and felt unwell. He decided to break into a house in a neighborhood to commit a burglary. Richard drove around until he reached Polly's neighborhood. Seeing an open window, he entered the house. He stated that he hadn't planned the incident, didn't know Polly or her family, and hadn't been following them. He was searching for valuables but didn't find much. As he was about to leave, Polly opened the bedroom door and saw him. Richard noted that she was very frightened and, in his panic, decided to take her. He stated that he put Polly in his car and started driving, eventually stopping in a vacant lot where he assaulted her. Afterwards, he got back into the driver's seat. When the woman and the babysitter spotted Richard on private piece of land, Polly was in the back seat. Police officers helped him retrieve his car from the mud, and at that point, Polly was still alive, which deeply frustrated officers as they believed her life could have been saved. After the car was pushed out of the mud, Richard drove down the highway, strangled Polly to death, and left her body there. Richard reported the exact location of the grave to the police, leading to a search that took place on December 4, 1993, 2 months 3 days after the girl was abducted. Polly's body was found in a grave beside the highway, dug by Richard himself. The forensic examination mainly confirmed the cause of death as strangulation, consistent with Richard's account. The date of her death was approximately the same day she disappeared. With all the evidence, Richard Allen Davis was put on trial for kidnapping, murdering, and raping Polly Klaas. During the trial, Richard had a chance to speak. Besides apologizing to the family, he accused Polly's father of sexually abusing her. Richard claimed that Polly had told him not to do to her what her father did to her. This accusation enraged Polly's father, who nearly attacked Richard, but the people present compartmented him. Richard's words shocked everyone, not only because he didn't apologize, but also because they doubted the truth of his claim about Polly's father. On June 18, 1996, Richard Allen Davis was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Polly Klaas. In August, he was sentenced to death. He tried to overturn the death sentence but failed. In 2006, Richard overdosed on pills in his cell but was revived and returned to prison. In 2009, his lawyer attempted to appeal his conviction to the Supreme Court but was unsuccessful. The Supreme Court upheld his death sentence. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Sophia McKenna. Sophia McKenna was born on March 7, 1996, in North Stonington, Connecticut. At the time of the incident, she was 21 years old and living in Groton, Connecticut. She was the daughter of Michelle from her first marriage and grew up with her brother, Justin, and her younger sister, Grace. Sophia was very caring towards her siblings, whom she loved dearly. As a child, she was happy and intelligent, showing unique qualities. She was active and full of energy, leading a vibrant and fulfilling life. However, her life was significantly affected by her parents' divorce when she was about 6 or 7 years old, which left her with a deep emotional scar. During high school, Sophia was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which contributed to her depression. This mental illness is marked by extreme mood swings, including episodes of mania or hypomania. Sophia faced emotional lows, characterized by sadness and melancholy, alternating with high-energy periods of euphoria. These mood swings affected her behavior and ability to think clearly. She received treatment, including medication and therapy, to help manage her symptoms, but there is no cure for bipolar disorder. This condition poses challenges for both Sophia and her family. It had a significant impact on her daily life, making her behavior unpredictable and her life chaotic, leading to unstable relationships. Those around her often exhibited complex behaviors as well. In 2015, Sophia met Austin, a bright and cheerful young man who quickly won her heart. He pursued Sophia with charm and determination, and they entered into a 3-year relationship. Unfortunately, this relationship was difficult for both Sophia and her mother, Michelle. Austin had some troubling behaviors. He was somewhat aggressive and used anabolic steroids for sports, which contributed to the instability of their relationship. The couple frequently argued and shouted at one another, sometimes escalating to physical confrontations. Sophia, who struggled with mental health issues, often initiated these conflicts. On multiple occasions, Austin's aggressive behavior resulted in injuries to Sophia, necessitating hospital visits. About a month before the incident, Sophia found out about Austin's cheating and decided to end their relationship. Despite this, they still met occasionally. While dealing with her emotions, Sophia focused on moving forward. She was a striking young woman and briefly worked as a model for a local jeans company, which helped her pay for her education. Eventually, she graduated as a massage therapist and got a job at an upscale spa called the Red Door, located in a luxury hotel. There, she met Spencer Mugford, a 20-year-old colleague. Spencer, originally from Florida, loved the sea and was an experienced swimmer working as a sailing instructor. He came from a caring family that had big hopes for his future. Spencer and Sophia quickly formed a close bond due to their shared interests and similar personalities. They reportedly dated for a while, but their families disapproved because the couple often found themselves in troublesome situations. Sophia's mother, Michelle, expressed deep concern for her daughter's well-being, particularly since Sophia continued to meet with her ex-boyfriend, Austin, and they frequently drank alcohol together, which had become a nearly daily habit. Ultimately, Sophia and Spencer decided to end their romantic relationship and remain friends. The exact reasons for this decision are unclear, but it seems that Sophia may have rekindled her relationship with Austin. Despite this, Sophia and Spencer continued to spend a lot of time together, both at work and outside of it, including on their last day together. On Saturday the 27th, Austin tried to reach her but didn't get any response. Initially, he wasn't too concerned because he knew Sophia often slept in. However, after several hours of trying to call and message her without success, he started to worry. He then reached out to Sophia's mother, Michelle, to check if Sophia had contacted her the night before. Michelle hadn't looked at her phone because her younger daughter had been using it all morning. When Michelle checked her phone, she saw that she had 7 missed calls from an unknown number. She decided to call back but only reached the voicemail of Spencer, boyfriend of her daughter's. This made her suspect that the calls might have been from Sophia. Michelle then tried to reach Sophia but got no answer. Feeling anxious, she and Austin started to search for Sophia. Austin called all the local hospitals, while Michelle reported Sophia as missing to the police. They contacted Spencer's family and found out that his relatives were also concerned because he hadn't arrived at an important family gathering and had not answered their calls. They went to Spencer's apartment but found no indication that he had been there. Spencer's father was worried because he knew his son had met with Sophia the night before, especially considering the problems she was dealing with. Spencer's mother mentioned that her son had said he planned to go fishing with a friend, but she suspected he was not truthful and actually intended to meet Sophia. She last spoke to him at 10 p.m. when he said goodnight. Concerned about his absence, Spencer's family reported both his and his girlfriend's disappearance to the police around 6:30 p.m. next day. The police started searching for them at that time. Austin reached out to the sheriff to share information about Sophia and Spencer's whereabouts the night before. He explained that he knew this because he had let Sophia go there. Austin also mentioned that he found a video Sophia posted on Snapchat the night before. In the video, which was recorded on Spencer's phone, they were on a boat heading towards the lighthouse. The footage showed a young man rowing towards the lighthouse, and it looked like they were having a good time. Later, Sophia uploaded a video to her Snapchat account. In the video, she was playfully posing with a concrete barrier and a lighthouse in the background, which had a "Do Not Cross" sign. What happened just minutes after this video remains a mystery. 5 minutes after posting the video at 2:05 a.m., Spencer's mobile phone made its first call to Michelle, Sophia's mother. This was followed by 3 more calls at 2:06, 2:08, and the last call at 2:09. Michelle, who was asleep at the time, did not answer any of these calls. No voicemails or text messages were left, and 911 did not receive any calls from that number that night. The photos and videos shared by them verified their presence at the lighthouse. Consequently, the police quickly sent 20 Coast Guard units to the location. Searches were carried out by the Coast Guard, firefighters, and police using air, sea, and land methods. The police made their first significant find: Sophia's car parked on a university campus, along with her cell phone inside it. Simultaneously, on that same night, the Coast Guard found a T-shirt that Spencer had worn in the video. The police theorized that Spencer may have used it to tie the boat to the shore. The search went on through the night and into the next day. Soon after, a storm hit and state authorities decided to suspend the search for them until new clues or signs of their possible location emerged. This decision left their families and friends devastated, but they didn't give up. They continued searching on their own, putting up pictures and sharing information about Spencer and Sophia's disappearance all over the city. They urged the public to report any information they might have. However, despite many people being in the area when the young people went missing, no witnesses came forward. The families' searches continued for several days, but all questions remained unanswered. What happened? Why did Sophia repeatedly call her mother? Why didn't she leave a voicemail or call the police? There were many speculations and assumptions. Could they have consumed something illicit? Indeed, Sophia and Spencer had broken the law by stealing a boat from the campus and heading to the lighthouse without permission. It's likely Sophia feared they could be held accountable and thus chose not to contact the police. A few days prior, she and Spencer had already had legal issues. Spencer had been detained for driving under the influence, and Sophia had faced charges for aggressive behavior. Perhaps for this reason, she preferred to contact her mother rather than the police. However, it's unknown what other circumstances were present in Sophia's life at that moment. She might have been in a state of panic and unable to think clearly. Everyone's reaction to such situations can be unpredictable. On May 26, 2018, detectives worked to piece together the day's events. It started as a typical sunny and warm day, with the weekend ahead promising fun as the city prepared for Memorial Day celebrations. Sophia had the day off, while Spencer was scheduled to work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Once he finished his shift, the couple planned to meet and join in the festivities. They looked forward to spending the rest of the day together, including a visit to the famous lighthouse known for its paranormal happenings, which they were excited to explore. What happened after Spencer's shift is unclear. We don't know where he went, if he met anyone, or whether he had been drinking. However, we do know that Sophia parked her car at the University of Connecticut campus around 2 a.m. She left her cell phone in the car, possibly because she forgot it or it was out of charge. They then took an illegal sailboat that had no motor, weighed 14 pounds, and was only equipped with oars. They pushed the boat into the water and headed towards the lighthouse, navigating along the rocky shores. This was a dangerous situation because the boat didn't have any safety equipment. They probably felt confident taking this risk due to Spencer's swimming and boating skills, which he had had since childhood. The investigators were only able to collect limited information about the events of that night. On Monday evening, while searching from a helicopter, the police spotted a white and blue sailboat stuck on the rocks, covered in dust. This boat was found 12 kilometers west of the lighthouse. Police reports suggest this could be the same boat that went missing from the campus and might have been used by Spencer and Sophia, but this remains unconfirmed. Fingerprints were discovered on the boat, but they were never analyzed, and the results were not made public to confirm whether they matched those of the young couple. Additionally, there was confusion about the type of boat involved. It was first described as a kayak, but later reports indicated it was a white sailboat with red markings. On June 8, 2018, fishermen on a commercial vessel near the Long Island Straits spotted something unusual in the water. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was a man's body. They promptly reported their find to the Coast Guard. When police arrived, they retrieved the body of a young man from the shore. They observed unexplained bruises and abrasions on the body, which was later identified as Spencer Mugford. He had been reported missing a few days earlier, along with his girlfriend, Sophia McKenna. To investigate the cause of Spencer's death, his body was sent for examination. The autopsy results confirmed that drowning was the cause of death, with no evidence of violence and all injuries linked to water. However, the specific details of the autopsy were not made public. During the same weekend that Spencer and his girlfriend went missing, 2 other men also disappeared in the area, and their bodies were later discovered, also having drowned. Initially, the police viewed these incidents as tragic accidents caused by unfortunate circumstances, and they did not explore any other theories at that time. Unfortunately, Spencer's girlfriend, Sophia McKenna, was never found. After several days of searching, fishermen discovered Spencer's body, leading his family to publish an obituary in the local media. In contrast, Sophia's family also wrote an obituary but remained hopeful for her return and continued to actively search for her. They frequently tried to recall the events leading up to her disappearance, trying to reconstruct what the young people did that evening and whether they interacted with anyone that night. Unfortunately, no new information surfaced. It remained unclear whether there were any calls made from Spencer's phone besides those to Michelle, as his mobile device was never found, and the police did not provide cell phone records. Moreover, the cameras at both the lighthouse and the campus were reportedly malfunctioning, resulting in no video footage from that night. It was also revealed that authorities had not checked the lighthouse, which should have been done immediately after the couple went missing. In July 2018, Sophia McKenna's family created a Facebook page named Searching for Sophia McKenna to keep awareness of her case alive. The page was used to share updates, brochures, and requests for information from the public. A few weeks after Sophia went missing, a concerning incident occurred. Michelle received a message from Sophia's social media account asking for money. Since Sophia's phone was with the police, this message raised suspicions of possible hacking. The investigations into Spencer's death and Sophia's disappearance reached a standstill, with police providing no definitive answers. Meanwhile, various unofficial theories about the case circulated. One theory suggested that Austin, Sophia's ex-boyfriend, may have been involved in their disappearance, with some speculating that he could have harmed Sophia and received help from his friends in disposing of Spencer's body. Sophia and Austin had a rocky relationship characterized by frequent fights and physical confrontations, which became a topic of public gossip. Michelle, Sophia's mother, saw many of their arguments firsthand. A month before Sophia went missing, serious problems emerged after she discovered Austin was cheating on May 8, 2018, which led her to break up with him. In what could have been a revenge move or a fresh start, Sophia started dating another guy and brought him to her apartment. This angered Austin, who stormed over and began banging and kicking the door while shouting insults at Sophia. After around 15 minutes of quiet, Sophia thought Austin had left and opened the door, but he was still there and tried to push his way inside. Luckily, Sophia quickly managed to shut the door again. Neighbors reported hearing him threaten to harm Sophia if she didn't open it. By the time the police and Michelle arrived, Austin had been arrested. The following day, May 9th, a court order came into effect. In her statement, Sophia detailed earlier attacks by Austin and included photos of her injuries. She expressed that she was afraid for her life because he was stalking her. A restraining order was issued, preventing Austin from being in the same area as Sophia. However, Sophia later felt guilty about the situation, and the restrictions were changed. Now, Austin was only barred from being in the same apartment as her. The man who was with Sophia at the time did not reveal his identity and initially did not cooperate with the police. Michelle initially claimed that it was Spencer with Sophia, but later changed her statement. However, a colleague whom Sophia trusted confirmed that it was indeed Spencer. Colleagues of Sophia and Spencer stated that they were in a relationship at the time of their disappearance and acted like a couple both at work and outside of it. Witnesses reported an incident at the hotel where Sophia's ex, Austin, confronted her at her workplace and threatened her publicly. Despite this, Austin and his father joined the search for the missing couple, using a private helicopter and distributing flyers with their images throughout the city. Austin claimed on social media that Sophia had been his girlfriend for 3 years and insisted she had only a platonic friendship with Spencer. Many found this post strange, as it seemed to focus more on his relationship with Sophia than on her disappearance. On July 10th, Sophia's family and friends held a memorial for her. Austin attended the event with Michelle and later shared a now-deleted message online saying, "Rest in peace, baby, we'll see each other soon." These actions raised concerns among people who knew them. Austin told the police that he spent the entire day with Sophia on May 26th and that they continued to meet despite a court order, even making plans for the following day. A friend of Austin mentioned that around 3 a.m. on the night of the incident, Austin texted Sophia saying he was at the gym with a friend. However, this claim seems questionable since gyms are closed at that hour. His family asserted he was home before leaving for the gym. An anonymous witness stated that Austin and his brother were invited to a party that day. Although Austin initially planned to attend, he later texted that he was tired and would not go. This situation raises concerns about Austin's location when Sophia and Spencer went missing, and there are no clear answers regarding his whereabouts. Austin's friends describe him as moody, which may be intensified by steroid use. There were rumors about Austin, his brother, and a friend having ties to the local police. Furthermore, a woman related to Austin was reportedly married to the police chief who was looking into Sophia's case and had faced complaints of police violence. However, the trustworthiness of these claims, made by a friend of Austin with a criminal history, is questionable. The day after these rumors circulated, a YouTube channel focused on disappearances in Long Island uploaded a video about Sophia. After that, Austin deleted all of their photos together from his social media, leading to confusion, especially since Sophia's fate was still unknown. One theory suggests that Austin had started dating someone new and wanted to avoid complications. However, it seemed odd that he removed all photos of Sophia. Additionally, shortly after Sophia went missing, Austin became noticeably less involved in the search efforts. When he met with investigators, he seemed calm and collected, showing no visible signs of distress over the loss of someone important. However, this alone is not enough to make any accusations against Austin, as people have different ways of responding to stress. One theory proposes that Sophia was murdered to stop her from testifying against Austin in a domestic violence case. If she hadn't spoken, there would not have been enough evidence to proceed, possibly leading to the case being dismissed. This scenario occurred in the summer of 2018 when the charges against Austin were dropped. It's crucial to mention that Austin is not formally considered a suspect. This theory is speculative, and the investigation is ongoing. Another theory suggests that Sophia and Spencer might have encountered dangerous people at the lighthouse. It was a busy holiday, but witnesses either failed to remember them or deemed the information unimportant, resulting in no reports made to the police. Sophia's mother suspected that her daughter could have been kidnapped or trafficked, but there is no evidence or ransom requests to back this up. The police also looked into the possibility of an accident caused by poor judgment. The young couple took an unprepared boat without life jackets into strong currents. After reaching the lighthouse, they secured the boat with Spencer's t-shirt and took some photos, only to discover that the boat had drifted away. Spencer, relying on his swimming skills, may have underestimated the cold temperature of the water. The darkness could have distorted his perception of distance, making the boat seem closer than it actually was. Exhausted from his workday and the swim to the lighthouse, Spencer might have drowned. Sophia realized she couldn't see or hear Spencer, so she attempted to call her mother for help. In her desperation, she might have jumped in to save Spencer and ended up drowning herself. Although Sophia was not a strong swimmer, alcohol could have influenced her to make a poor decision. Alternatively, she may have been walking along the narrow ledge of the lighthouse, trying to find Spencer, when she stumbled and fell while holding her phone. If that happened, she could have been swept away by the current and drowned. These possibilities are still considered, but other theories exist as well. None are formally recognized, and there are no suspects or culprits identified. Most of this information circulates on social media. Sophia's family and friends are still searching for her, determined to find out what happened and where she might be. In 2019, an independent detective discovered several bones near the shore and quickly reported them to the police. However, when investigators arrived, they concluded that the bones were from animals. The remains were never collected, and due to high costs, no forensic tests were performed to check if they were human. There are many troubling aspects of this case that deserve a deeper investigation. After all, it involves a missing person whose family is in distress, desperately seeking answers. Sophia deserves ongoing search efforts. While other bodies of missing individuals have been found in these waters, Sophia's has not. There have been no new developments in her case, and the mystery of what occurred that night at the lighthouse remains unresolved. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jordan Worth. Alexander Skeel was born on August 17, 1995, in Kingston upon Hull. He grew up in a loving and supportive family. The boys spent their first months in the hospital in special rooms for premature babies, where they fought against very low body weight. Thankfully, with the help of skilled doctors, the children began to recover. However, Alexander's brother gained weight more quickly, and by their first birthday, he showed almost no signs of being premature. In contrast, Alexander was weaker and dealt with a condition called hydrocephalus, which is the excessive buildup of fluid in the brain, leading to him being classified as disabled. Despite these health challenges from birth, Alexander's intellectual growth was unaffected, and physically, he was similar to his classmates. He even participated actively in sports at school. Their parents adored their sons from a young age, showering them with love and care while investing time and money in their education and overall well-being. After graduating from high school, both brothers enrolled in the prestigious Bedford College to continue their studies. Alexander was intelligent, attractive, and made an effort to go to the gym regularly, which helped him gain attention from women. However, unlike his brother, who actively dated and had a vibrant social life, Alexander was shy and preferred to concentrate on his studies. In college, Alexander experienced love at first sight when he met a stunning girl named Jordan Worth. They were the same age, and Jordan came from a wealthy family. Growing up, she was used to getting what she wanted and rarely faced rejection. She always dressed elegantly, took great care of her appearance, and enjoyed a vibrant social life. Jordan was one of the most popular girls on campus and attracted the attention of many admirers. Besides her studies, she volunteered her time, raising funds and providing aid to local shelters for homeless animals as well as to children facing hunger in Africa. Jordan's efforts to make a positive impact were recognized multiple times. At first, her appeared to be an angel, kind, caring, smart, and beautiful. Alexander fell in love with her instantly but assumed that the outgoing and popular Jordan would never notice him. To his surprise, she was also drawn to him and took the first step to get to know him. Although Jordan was more experienced in relationships, for the shy Alexander, she was his very first love. The couple started dating in 2012 when they were both just 17 years old. Initially, their relationship was thriving. They spent a lot of time together and were nearly inseparable. At college, they were often referred to as the most beautiful couple, which made Jordan feel very flattered. The first 6 months of their relationship were filled with love, romance, and mutual respect. They surprised each other with thoughtful gifts and enjoyed celebrating small but meaningful milestones. Their social media accounts were filled with photos of them together, showcasing their happiness and featuring heartfelt captions and declarations of love. To outsiders, it appeared that they were perfect for each other and destined for a long, happy life together. They quickly decided to move in together and rented an apartment. As they were both still students, their parents provided substantial financial support. Fortunately, their parents were supportive of their relationship. Jordan was particularly fond of Alexander's parents because she came across as a responsible young woman with aspirations to become an art history teacher, leaving a positive impression on everyone she met. As time went on, Jordan's behavior started to change. It began with her increasing demands. Each month, she wanted Alexander to update her on everything he did. She openly checked his personal messages on his phone, email, and social media. She would get jealous for no apparent reason. Although this behavior was concerning, Alexander tried to ignore it because he was in love, and it didn't bother him too much. Even when she insisted he were only the clothes she bought for him, he dismissed it as her way of showing care. Soon, Jordan began to restrict Alexander's social circle. She decided who he could see and who he could no longer stay in touch with, affecting not just his friends and classmates but also his family members. Despite this control, Jordan never complained to anyone, and they still appeared to be a happy and perfect couple in public and on social media. She began to enjoy her control over him. She deleted contacts from Alexander's phone without his knowledge, blocked his family and friends, and even replied to messages on his behalf, often in a rude and insulting way. Afterward, she deleted these conversations, so Alexander had no idea what he had said to people who no longer wanted to communicate with him. The final reason for the breakup occurred when Alexander's twin brother raised concerns. Jordan started to block their communication. By then, their parents also noticed that Alexander was pulling away from the family, while his girlfriend was avoiding them completely. She refused to visit even on holidays and didn't want to talk on the phone. When they did try to reach her, she was openly rude. In the rare moments when Alexander's mother managed to speak with him, she urged him to break up with his girlfriend, warning that the relationship would lead to trouble. However, Alexander, deeply in love, refused to listen and defended his girlfriend, insisting that she cared for him and meant no harm. The Skeel family soon realized that Jordan had pressured their son to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. Meanwhile, she took all the money he earned to spend on her own needs and entertainment. The parents once again tried to talk to their son and persuade him to leave Jordan, but they were unsuccessful. In 2013, during his coming-of-age celebration, Jordan committed a shocking act that went unpunished. That day, she and her friends celebrated at a country hotel. As the evening progressed and guests began to leave, Jordan suddenly vanished without telling anyone. Alexander was distraught as he searched for Jordan, fearing something had happened to her. However, she returned to their room in the morning, heavily intoxicated. When Alexander tried to find out where she had been, she violently lashed out at him with both fists and insults, then laughed. 2 months later, during his own 18th birthday celebration, Jordan started a fight in front of Alexander's family and friends. She assaulted a 15-year-old girl, who was a neighbor well known to the Skeel family and had been invited to the party. Jordan believed the girl was being overly friendly with Alexander, which prompted her to attack, pulling the girl's hair and scratching her face. Jordan was still upset, but it was obvious to everyone what her true nature was. Afterward, her parents and brother urged Alexander to break up with her because of her aggressive and inappropriate behavior. Surprisingly, for the first time, he listened to them and acknowledged that she had indeed overreacted. That same evening, he spoke with her and informed her that he would not be returning to their apartment and would instead stay at his parents' house. After nearly 6 months apart, they reunited and had children together. During that time, Alexander focused on his studies and work, rarely thinking of Jordan. However, on New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised him with a call to share the news that she was pregnant and they would be parents in the spring. Alexander felt both surprised and happy. Jordan apologized for not telling him sooner, explaining that she believed he no longer wanted to see her. When the guy's parents found out they were going to have a grandchild, they were overjoyed and invited Jordan to move in with them. She accepted the offer and moved into the Skeel family home. She officially got married with Alexander, and 3 months later, she and Alexander welcomed a son named William. The young parents were extremely happy, and they enjoyed a peaceful and harmonious life together until around mid-fall 2014. During this time, Jordan genuinely cared for her partner, made an effort to please him, and fell in love with him again. When William was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. During this time, she became moody and emotional, insisting that Alexander move out of his parents' house immediately. Alexander attributed her behavior to hormonal changes but agreed to rent an apartment for them in the city, and they soon moved in. In the summer of 2015, they welcomed their second child, a girl named Alice. Alexander was overjoyed and treated his wife and children with great affection. However, Jordan, feeling secure that Alexander would not leave her, began to reveal her darker side. The turning point occurred after the move. Jordan prohibited her husband from contacting his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Meanwhile, she accepted financial help from them and even had Alexander ask his parents for money. Within a few months, she completely dominated him, breaking his spirit and taking control of his life. Jordan frequently humiliated and insulted her husband, and eventually, she began to hit him. At first, her attacks were not severe, as she wanted to see how he would react. When she realized he would tolerate everything, keep quiet, and face no consequences for her actions, she unleashed her cruelty, revealing her violent tendencies. The trouble began during their house renovation when she was unhappy with everything Alexander did. Frustrated, he remarked that it seemed impossible to satisfy her. In response, she threw a hammer at him, hitting him on the head and causing a deep wound. Dazed and nearly unconscious, he fell to the ground, holding his head as blood streamed down his face. He asked his wife for help or to call an ambulance, but she coldly told him, "Crawl away somewhere and die," and walked into another room to watch TV. Alexander treated his head injury on his own without visiting a doctor or telling anyone. This led Jordan to believe she could do anything without consequences, convinced her husband would never report her actions and would avoid both hospitals and the police. For the next 3 years, Alexander endured constant emotional and physical suffering. He became so depressed that he didn't recognize the threat he was under. Despite this, he continued to work hard to provide for his family, but his frustration and dissatisfaction with his wife grew steadily. Jordan not only controlled him every day but also escalated the cruelty. He was not allowed to sleep on the bed and had to lie on the floor next to the bed, without a blanket or pillow. He was also banned from entering the kitchen and could only eat the leftovers that his wife and children didn't finish. This left Alexander starving. As he was unable to buy food, Jordan had taken all his money. Furthermore, his wife deprived him of sleep and rest, creating a cruel form of entertainment for herself. Whenever he finally fell asleep, she would hit him on the head or pour boiling water on him. He later remembered waking up each time in intense pain, either bleeding or burned. After that, he would tend to his wounds with whatever he could find, while his wife quietly went to bed. Alexander viewed this situation as normal. He felt morally defeated and stopped trying to fight against it. He completely cut off communication with his parents and brother, and his wife frequently asked them for money on his behalf. She also supported her own parents financially, ensuring she could afford whatever she wanted. Alexander lost a significant amount of weight and dropped below 50 pounds. His body was frequently marked by wounds, cuts, burns, and bruises, which drew concern from others. At his workplace, colleagues encouraged him to seek medical help, but his wife insisted he quit his job to avoid being discovered. After he was let go, he became trapped with Jordan, who began to abuse him continuously, leaving him longing for rescue. Although the couple appeared to be happy to outsiders, their home life was filled with horror. Jordan managed social media accounts for her husband, frequently sharing old photos of their family along with captions expressing their love and gratitude for one another. Nobody could have imagined that a woman who looked angelic and was a mother of 2 could transform into a sophisticated monster behind closed doors. She knocked out her husband's teeth and inflicted a deep cut on his arm with a knife. His body also showed signs of burns, but he was unable to go to the hospital. At home, he had only plastic wrap and tape, which he used to bind his wounds. Neighbors often heard screams coming from their house, and some were so alarming that they called the police. However, Jordan always managed to convince the officers that everything was fine between her and her husband. During the next visit by the police, prompted by neighbors' concerns, one officer noticed a man with a fresh wound and blood running down his arm. The man appeared emaciated and had bruises of various sizes on his face. Jordan attempted to explain to the officer that her husband was mentally unstable and sometimes harmed himself. However, this time the police called for paramedics, and Alexander was taken to the hospital. The doctors were shocked by his condition. He was barely alive, and his arm was so severely injured that amputation was a real possibility. Alexander had severe second and third-degree burns covering his body. He weighed just 94 pounds, and his shoulder ligaments were injured from being hit with a screwdriver. He also had a deep cut on his forearm, several knocked-out teeth, and many bruises. During this time, Jordan entered the hospital, insisting that her husband be released to her. She claimed that he was fine and that he had caused all his injuries himself. However, no one believed her distressed claims, and it was decided to take her to the police station for questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing and stuck to her claim that her husband was harming himself. However, when Alexander's parents arrived at the police station after visiting him in the hospital, her attitude changed. She went on to explain in detail the actions she had taken against her husband, saying she had trained him like a dog and that he couldn't escape from her. At the same time, Jordan argued that her husband's behavior provoked her violence, alleging he was cheating on her and intentionally trying to upset her. She also maintained that he was mentally ill and had a tendency to self-harm. The man's parents firmly denied all the claims made against him. However, he hesitated to speak out against his wife at first. It was only after receiving treatment and consulting with a psychologist that Alexander found the courage to share the traumatic experiences he endured at home in recent years. Jordan believed that she would only receive a minor administrative penalty, so she was not particularly concerned about the upcoming trial. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge convicted 22-year-old Jordan of deliberately causing serious harm, both physical and emotional abuse, as well as coercive control. She received a prison sentence of 7.5 years. Her status as a mother of 2 young children did not lessen the severity of her punishment. Jordan was taken aback by this sentence, as the case was unprecedented in the UK. The children were placed in the care of their father and grandparents during their mother's imprisonment. After fully recovering from years of abuse, Alexander began working in the community and is now helping victims of domestic violence. On July 4, 2023, Jordan was released on parole after serving 5 years of her 7.5-year sentence. However, she is not allowed to approach her ex-husband or see their children. She is currently engaged to a bricklayer named Adam Stepp and is getting ready to become a mother for the 3rd time.